Hey everyone, it's GameFace episode 125. We're a quarter of a way to 200.
Yeah.
The time's just flying on by.
Getting there.
Today,
a mere year and a half.
Yeah, that's what it should take. Today is 420. For those of you who are inclined, have a great 420. I had floated the idea of bringing something in to do one of our last shows here in the studio.
But we wisely thought that the Hitler's birthday thing was a bad idea.
Yeah, exactly. So those of you who care, hope you're having a great 420. Hope all of you guys are having a great Friday night. We are back on our normal day and time, and I think we're probably going to stay here for the foreseeable future.
If for some reason you've decided to stop playing God of War and watch us.
Yeah. We'll get to God of War, absolutely, in this episode. It's going to be a big part of the episode.
I didn't wear this for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So Matt is wearing his God of War sweatshirt.
It's like wearing the band T-shirt to the concert.
Actually, maybe you should stand up and kind of show them, or at least, yeah. So I have this...
might make the microphone go crazy, but we can do the hood. Chesley.
Yeah. I have that same sweatshirt.
Yeah, it's from God of War 3.
Yep. And I was wearing it the other day. I totally didn't realize I'm wearing this sweater. I go to wash my hands in the bathroom. I look in the mirror and I'm like, I am playing God of War while wearing a God of War sweatshirt. Seemed pretty weird. But yeah, we'll be talking about God of War later on in the show. We actually have a great show today. Lots of great topics. Some interesting stuff happened this week.
Like we'd tell you if we didn't.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty honest.
Here and there.
But we do have a great show today. I think we have like 9 topics, as most we've had for quite a while. We'll probably spend a little bit less time on each topic than we usually do. Some of you people may be happy about that.
Famous last words.
No, my famous last words is, I think this episode's only going to be about an hour and a half, and then it never is.
I can make anything 3 hours.
Yeah.
You know that.
I am going to try to keep things moving along today, because we have a lot of stuff to get to, and we are going to keep it to our usual time.
And some of this stuff is probably not the deepest subjects, because
Yeah.
it's just sort of news item things.
Yeah, so we'll be jumping a lot more quickly than we usually do in this episode. And again, hope you're having a great Friday night. Let's get on with the show. We're going to talk first about something I never thought would ever happen, Matt. It was leaked this week that Call of Duty Black Ops 4 will not have a campaign.
So is that like for real? Like we know that? Or
well, I'll
like
put it to you this way,
Matt.
Matt.
It's just a reliable rumor? Or?
So when stuff like this comes out, if it's not true, the publisher or the developer will come out and say, oh, no, that's baloney. That has not happened.
Right.
And it's been
So the
5
rumor
days.
is like no campaign and Battle Royale mode from Raven.
I think Battle Royale is just an assumption. Everything's going to have it now.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the topics I had originally had on the rundown for today's show that was cut because we had enough already was that Battlefield 5 is working on a Battle Royale mode. Mm-hmm. I think we can just assume that every shooter from here on out, until people get tired of it.
If a game has a gun in it, there's probably going to be a Battle Royale
mode. So
in fact, I'm waiting for the For Honor Battle Royale update at this point.
which I
would try.
I would too, because at least it's something different, right?
Yeah.
So
if Battlefront 2 could do it with the Starfighter thing, I would be interested.
Yeah,
that'd be some
crazy.
Nice chaos.
That's absolutely. So I don't think really the big story is that it's getting Battle Royale. Now, if they're saying, if ultimately it comes out that they swapped out the campaign for a Battle Royale mode,
I feel like that would be.
I think that's complete
different teams, and also like the timing's wrong.
Yeah, that would never be the reason why.
You'd have to have scrapped a campaign that would have been a year and a half along to switch to Battle Royale mode.
Yeah, if there's no campaign in this game, this is a decision that was made a while ago.
Yeah.
They're not going to work on a campaign for 2.5 years, 3 years, and then
I feel like you can probably target the games as a service idea more than, because the multiplayer is kind of seen where the money is at this point. The main problem I have with that, I mean, other than the fact that I prefer campaigns over multiplayer, is not that I was particularly interested in Black Ops 4.
Well, we haven't seen it yet.
Right. Also, I don't like the Black Ops games very much, but like this to me is like, okay, Black Ops is the top selling Call of Duty sub brand, right?
Yeah.
So you just slap Black Ops on this thing and hope it sells like the other ones did. And it's like, I think a larger chunk of the audience for Call of Duty likes the campaign than maybe they're giving them credit for.
I think Activision gets a lot of sales from the campaign. Mm-hmm. Those players typically, I don't think, stick around very long, so they're not ultimately a part of the
new business
Call of
model.
Duty, right? The Call of Duty ecosystem, the game as a service model that has become so prevalent. But I do
The
think
thing you have to show your shareholders to make them happy now.
absolutely, yeah. But I think this is a huge mistake. You say you don't like Black Ops. Black Ops I love. It is my favorite Call of Duty franchise. Everyone that's come out has been my favorite Call of Duty, save for maybe the first, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which just completely flipped the script and like blew my mind the first time I saw it. But since that first release, typically the Black Ops games have been my favorites. Not just the campaigns, but also the multiplayer and the way that Treyarch handles the multiplayer. So I wouldn't say that I'm personally all that disappointed that the campaign is being removed, because honestly, the last couple Call of Duties, even Black Ops 3, I really had to fight to get through the campaign. Like, my honeymoon with Call of Duty has been over for quite a while. Now, Infinite Warfare's campaign was pretty great.
Yeah.
And it's a shame if this is a precedent that we're going to see going forward forever, that we won't be able to get campaigns like Infinite Warfare again going forward.
Well, it's like, I guess one way to put it would be like if Activision has decided that is not worthwhile use of the amount of money, that, because those campaigns must cost a lot of money.
It has all the data.
Yeah.
More than anyone. I mean, they have those.
They know.
They know exactly how many people finish the campaign, how much people play of it, what percentage
and
of
who knows
their
how
players
granulated
play.
they're making this decision on. Where like Infinite Warfare didn't do well. I know they probably consider that definitely a failure of some kind.
Absolutely.
And then I needed more space on my hard drive for God of War to install, and I deleted Call of Duty World War II because I'm like, when am I ever going to go back to that?
Yeah.
Like,
well, if you're not going to play the
I can play
multiplayer.
multiplayer. I never got more than a third through the campaign. I didn't see a reason to keep going.
I ended up finishing the campaign, but I had to really, really fight to get through that campaign.
In the end, I went back and I did play Infinite Warfare's campaign a second time.
Yeah.
Instead, on a harder
it's
difficulty.
good.
It's really good. I love it. I love it. I love that game. One of my favorite Call of Duty campaigns. But apparently, I'm one of the few.
Well, I don't know if you are the few. It's an interesting decision. Look, we know that the majority of people buy Call of Duty for multiplayer. That is how much of a majority, I don't know. But it's not a surprise to me that most people who buy it because they're going to end up playing it for the next 12 months.
It didn't used to be that way. I remember in the Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2 era, like they released some numbers, and they basically like 70% of the people who bought the games just played the campaign.
Yeah, and finished it.
Yeah.
Which is very rare.
And maybe dabbled with multiplayer, but they were not there for the multiplayer. They were there for the story and the campaign. And the co-op, actually, because that was when co-op was a big deal.
Yeah.
And obviously that has shifted tremendously in intervening, 8 years or so since then?
Well, I mean, the data for finishing campaigns has never been great. Like, if you go back even to the original Gears of War, I remember Cliff Bleszinski saying that 30% of people who play Gears finished the campaign, and that campaign was like 7 or 8 hours long.
That's actually pretty good. Like, the usual number is 20.
Well, I finished Ni no Kuni 2, and at the end, you get a trophy for finishing the game, and I went and looked at the rarity of it, and it was rare at 21%.
Yeah, 20% is about your expected number for how many people will finish a game.
And I guess if you look at it from that angle, that's
why you polish the first third more than the last two-thirds.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because most people are only going to see that part.
Yeah. But if you look at it from that perspective, it does kind of make business sense for them to, I don't know if it makes business sense for them to cut it, but you can kind of understand it a little bit.
Well, it's partly maybe an experiment just to see if it impacts anything directly. Like just to see like, oh, what if we don't put this expensive thing that only 20% of people even finish in here and see if it sells just fine, and that saves us a lot of money and still gets us the sales. Plus, with the games as a service model that they might be trying to shift to, that could be a much more lucrative outcome. And you just kind of got this permanent Black Ops platform to build on.
Well, then the question becomes,
what differentiates these things from now on?
Right. Yeah.
Just like you'll end up with like a Black Ops platform and a advanced future warfare platform and a World War II platform, and those are your 3 Call of Duty games.
There are pillars. And then the other question is, do you need the 3 studios making games anymore? Because they have these 3 different factions of teams that are making the games to make sure that a game comes out every year, but they still have the 2 to 3 year cycle so that they're quality.
With a bunch of other studios supporting them as well. It's all if you're a studio in servitude to Activision, that's basically all you do.
Oh, absolutely. And do they need that anymore now? I mean, you should be able to make a new multiplayer suite in a year. You shouldn't. I mean, that's really the campaign is really where a lot of the time And the money in development comes in because you're licensing so much stuff for these campaigns. You're paying all these pop culture folks to come in and star in the campaign. You're paying people for voiceware, all this stuff that you won't need anymore if you only do multiplayer.
And clearly none of that stuff really moves the needle anymore.
And I wonder too if like it takes the shine off of the game. I mean, you start thinking about like the marketing, the TV commercials, the trailers. What do you show to get people excited about the game?
You do a couple of CG trailers and you know,
of people shooting each
people
other,
shooting each other and doing cool takedowns and stuff. I mean, most of this stuff can be replicated in multiplayer, except for some of the big buildings exploding. Maybe you add a mode, like an assault style mode, where like you get to blow up big stuff and like the rush gameplay mode in the war mode in World War II.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that has kind of like where when you lose a checkpoint or defend a checkpoint, like a big set piece moment happens, and you can use like different camera angles of that to be a commercial.
There's a very fine line between bravery and stupidity. And to me, Activision and Treyarch are walking on that line right now.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not pleased with the decision because if they get rid of the campaign, that means I'm never buying another Call of Duty game again.
Right. And see, I think a lot of people feel that way. And the other part, too, is...
I think they're just hoping that there's enough people that only care about the multiplayer and will then be invested in it as a platform, as a service sort of thing, that they'll make up for the people like me who aren't interested anymore.
How do you sell the game for $60, Matt?
I don't know.
And if you can't, is this the first step towards Call of Duty becoming a free-to-play game?
I can't really see Activision ever doing that.
But imagine trying to sell a multiplayer suite.
$30 maybe.
I mean, yeah. I mean, do you think people will buy this for $60 if all it has is multiplayer?
I don't know. I have no idea.
You wouldn't.
I wouldn't, no. But like, what if
wouldn't.
What if they do a Fortnite thing? What if it's like $30 for the whole thing, but the Battle Royale mode's free? But if you buy the game, you get a bunch of bonus stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we find
use the Fortnite model.
We find out in less than a month. They're unveiling Black Ops 4, I believe, on like May 21st or something. Typically, right before E3.
It's also kind of weird to me because like the way they had structured the logo, where they used just the four tally
bars,
marks.
Yeah.
And so, like I thought, like, oh, that's representing like the 4 pillars of the game, where you've got campaign,
Right.
you've got multiplayer, you've got zombies, and now you've got Battle Royale.
Yeah.
And like, I thought that's what they were going to do with that, but apparently not.
No.
Okay.
So, what's your prediction, Matt, on how successful this is going to be? I mean, do you think that it will... to me, I don't see any way it generates more revenue now than Red Dead Redemption 2 before the end of the year.
Well, I think that depends on Red Dead Redemption 2's online.
It'll depend on obviously it'll depend on the
stuff.
price too of Black Ops 4. If it does end up being a $40 game or a $30 game, you're losing half of your revenue off of each sale.
But you spent less money to make it.
Yeah.
A lot less money to make it.
A lot less, yeah.
So I don't know. Like I mean, I don't like to give Activision credit where I don't have to, but like they are one of the most calculating publishers in the world,
particularly with this franchise.
Yeah. So if this is their plan, they know something. Maybe they know something we don't. But I don't think they would have come to this decision lightly.
No, absolutely not. It's like when people say, "Oh, EA is just flying by the seat of its pants." Oh no, it's not.
No.
It is using intense data to make every little decision it makes. And Activision is the same way. None of these people fly blind before they make decisions. So in some ways, I am putting a little bit of my trust in Treyarch and Activision that it knows what it's doing. But at the same time, to me, it seems pretty insane. The other part, too, is like, what was Treyarch doing for the last 3 years if there's no campaign in the game?
I don't know.
What was it doing? Maybe finally we have a developer who could actually work like a 40-hour week and release a game.
Maybe. They've been doing it for a while.
Yeah. I mean, crunch is pretty typical at Treyarch when it's wrapping up a Black Ops game. And so I don't know, maybe Activision is just an amalgamation of all this stuff, all coming to fruition in one release. The changing market, the pressures from developers to not want to have these god-awful work-life balances anymore, the financial viability of spending all this money on a campaign that a small percentage of people play and an even smaller percentage of those people ever finish. Maybe just all that data is just putting all into the direction of this. But I was shocked to hear this news, undoubtedly shocked. Because if this continues, they'll never... That's the other thing. So Call of Duty games have had cultural touch points in them. No Russian. those are things that get people talking, and it helps Call of Duty become something more than a video game. And if you don't have those moments in your game anymore, your chances of that ever happening again are zero. None.
Although, to be fair, No Russian was 9 years ago.
It was, yeah.
Like, Call of Duty's campaigns have not really been relevant to the overall conversation for a long time, and now you go back to some of them and they're just sort of embarrassing in places.
They are, yeah, absolutely.
Especially the inclusion of Kevin Spacey at one point. That didn't age too well. Or like either like, you know, like you have a guest appearance like that just kind of goes, oh, now considering what's come out since then.
Right.
And then especially when you consider like so Kevin Spacey is the big villain in a game that's like targeted tremendously at like, you know, young and teen boys.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole bad series, like, whole horrible confluence of coincidences there.
Yeah.
And then like you've got something like Kit Harington in Infinite Warfare, who clearly must have cost something.
Yeah.
And was awful.
Yeah,
like,
he was. Yeah.
I mean, not that he is awful, but like that character just didn't work.
It didn't fit.
And every time I saw him, it was like, it's Jon Snow in a spacesuit. Like, it's like that's all I could think of. Like, it's just, it was. I mean, they did a really good job making it look like him, but all I could think is like, Jon Snow's in a spacesuit. I don't get it. How did he get here?
I think that's something that he's going to be dealing with for the rest of his career.
Yes.
Unfortunately for him, but
Well,
I'm assuming he made his money very well off of Game of Thrones.
But just lose the facial hair, and I think he'll be okay.
But then I don't think anyone will care about him. If he doesn't look like Jon Snow, does anyone care?
He'll get there.
We'll see.
He'll get there.
But like I said, not long to wait. We should get the full unveiling of Black Ops 4 in the next 4 weeks. May 20th or 21st is when the big unveiling happens. So not long to wait, but a scoop nonetheless. And I have to say, I hope it's wrong, because I do feel like Call of Duty still has the opportunity to, because of how much money they put into the campaign, it has at least the opportunity to surprise.
It would definitely be weird to
time,
like slap Black Ops on it and not continue that Black Ops world.
Yeah, because that also, well, I guess...
And I even say that as someone who doesn't care about the Black Ops world. It's like, it feels, that is a level of cynicism of just like, oh, we'll put Black Ops on this and you idiots will buy it. Like, that is really kind of
Well, the other thing, too,
rankling.
is that continuity has never been a strong suit of the Call of Duty franchise. No. Like, Black Ops has throwbacks that, they are tangentially connected.
There's always a Captain Price somewhere.
Right. And Modern Warfare has some villains that seem to be at least mentioned in every game.
Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3 are very strongly connected to each other. You're continuing through that same team and Soap and Price and all those guys. But Black Ops seemed to be more of a theme than a story.
Yeah. There are, if you go and dig, you can find people who have gone and tied all the games together and all that. But it's very...
If there can be a Zelda timeline, there can be a timeline for anything.
Absolutely. That's a good point. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about I don't even know how to intro this topic.
Yeah.
So there's a group called the Bully Hunters that just were announced last week. It is a .org. Their website was .org.
Oh, nonprofit.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are saying that they feel like this was a for-profit venture.
There's enough marketing behind it.
Yeah. And essentially, Bully Hunters was formed to stop bullying online in games, multiplayer games. And it all stems from Counter-Strike Go. And a lot of female players who play Counter-Strike Go feel like they're being harassed more than other games, although who knows if that's actually true. And so what they've done is they started this .org, where you can go to their website and say you're a player. I don't think you have to be a female. You could be any player. But if you're getting harassed online while playing Counter-Strike Go, you could go to their website and you can essentially hire a hitman to come into your game and then basically annihilate the person who's been bullying you. They put out an announcement trailer explaining what they were doing, and then they did like a debut live stream. Now keep in mind, this organization is backed by a marketing company in Chicago, the SteelSeries company, and a couple other pretty big gaming-related companies were footing the bill for this, so to speak. Then they had their debut stream, which you're seeing highlights of right now, where they actually tried to show their organization at work. And being kind, I would say, it didn't appear to be legit. They tried to have a live case where somebody got harassed, they contacted the Bully Hunters, The bully hunter went into the game and annihilated the player who was harassing the player, and it ended up looking really staged and fake.
Like a Ubisoft demo?
Yeah, one of those type deals. Just by looking at this live stream, you can tell that there is some money behind this organization. Obviously, their set is better than the set that we're sitting on right now.
There's really nice lighting. There's a fog machine in there somewhere.
There's a studio audience. There are like 20 PC.
Those are some nice
stations.
microphones.
Yeah, all of it. And so what happened was, when this came out, obviously there was revolt against it online. I'm not sure why there was revolt.
I don't know.
But
I think their heart's in the right place.
Right.
I like the idea. I feel like it's maybe...
Do you like the idea? Look, I agree with you. Their heart is in the right place, meaning, yes, we need to stop bullying female gamers when they're playing online. They should be able to go and play just like anyone else and not get harassed. Although I would say everybody gets harassed online. It's not just a female problem. It's far worse for them in a lot of cases. So I agree with you.
Especially in gaming.
Yeah, especially. Why? I have no freaking clue. It blows my mind. Why would you not want more girls to play games? Because doesn't that just create an ecosystem of potential girlfriends for you where somebody can actually enjoy your hobby with you?
Well, that's also part of the problem, is thinking of them as potential girlfriends and not just people.
Oh, yeah, I guess. So I agree with you. Whatever you can do to try to curb the harassment, great. To me, their idea was absolutely terrible, though, because you're essentially saying, hey, this person is harassing this female player, and this female player is hiring someone to come and harass them in the game. So you're basically playing the two wrongs making a right card with this.
I don't care about that so much. My issue with it is more that the biggest, one of the end goals of bullying is to get attention out of it and to, assert some kind of power, and to then have this other person come in to target you as a result of this.
Are you getting what you want?
Is to basically be like, hey, it worked.
Right.
And then I think you open up whoever the person that called Bully Hunter, you're opening them, if they figure out who called them on them, you're opening up even, you could escalate the harassment. That's someone could get angry enough or crazy enough to escalate stuff to the real world, which is a thing that happens shockingly often.
Yeah.
It's I like the kind of the vigilante justice idea of it, partly maybe because I'm just a Batman fan, but it feels like the negative potential consequences are really tangible. Not just in the sense of two wrongs for me. Oh, screw it. You got to punch the bully sometimes. Who cares?
No, you do.
I don't care.
Absolutely.
And I know that nowadays you both get suspended for that, but in my day, you won.
Yeah.
And it was a different world. But
it really was, and it wasn't even all that long ago.
Yeah, but I like the concept, but I just don't think it would work very well in practice. And then of course the other nightmare scenario is the person to come in and they're not better than the bully.
Well, so they're opaque about their screening process on how they hire the players who will go in.
Well, also, how do you know it's really happening?
They come into your game, and their gamer tag is always Bully Hunters and then a number afterwards. And then once the bully hunter kills the offender, they have some kind of prefabbed statement that they put in the chat saying, somebody's called me to come in and, settle your ass down.
What I'm saying is, what if, the people that hate bully hunters start hiring bully hunters to go just hit random people,
Well, swatting.
Right.
They'll start swatting with bully
swatting.
hunters. There's no...
I just feel like there's very little you can do in terms of this kind of organization that is going to not be exploitable by the people you're trying to stop.
No, you're right.
You know what I mean?
The crazy part to me is, presumably, they thought this through before they came up with the idea.
Well, there's clearly a lot of people behind it.
This went
through a lot of meetings.
Right. That's what I was going to say. They sat in meetings with all these sponsors, with tons of people who are in. Nobody said, hey, this is a bad idea. It is a bad idea.
Or they just decided that the negatives didn't outweigh the potential positives. I don't know what the thought process is on that.
But, so what is the end goal?
This just seems like a really strong backfire potential to me.
The end goal is to stop harassment, right?
Right.
How in a million years would you think that this would stop harassment? Because look, whoever is the guy who's being, or girl, who's being a total douchebag to someone else playing online, how is going into a game and annihilating them going to make things better? It won't. It just makes it worse. They're just going to get more angry, and their outburst is going to be even worse than it would have been if you had just left them alone. Like, I don't see any angle of this that was a good idea. Again, and I still think that two wrongs never make a right, and that's what you're doing here. You're going in and then trying to harass some other player because they harassed you. I just don't think that ever ends with a good result.
Well, it depends. Like, you know, but the problem here, I don't think, is the two wrongs making a right thing. I think the problem here is that it's not a real world consequence. You know, it's like the same argument. It's like, well, you know, it doesn't. You know, why should, you know, the cops be able to arrest somebody because that's just, you know, being mean to them too. It's like, well, you got to enforce order somehow, but like, there's no real world consequence to being annihilated in a video game by a guy who got hired to shoot at you in the video game. Like, it's just going to make the person on the other end of the computer angrier and angrier.
I agree with that.
Whereas, like, the reason that people back down from a situation like that in real life is because they don't want to get hurt.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like think about like the Guardian Angels gang in New York back in the 70s and 80s. If anyone's old enough to remember that, yeah. I'm sure you remember that because you were East Coast.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But like, you know, they would stand around they were literally a vigilante gang that would stand around on subway cars in New York City, and if shit went bad, they'd get involved.
Yeah.
But
they were a biker gang too. Like, they were basically a private security company.
Yeah,
is what it really comes down to. Because they would go to concerts and
all
this other stuff.
Without all the permits.
Right, yeah. without the legality, the illegal part of it. Yeah.
Worked great at Altamont.
Yeah.
Look it up, kids.
I mean, one thing I will say is, like, whoever came up with this idea was trying to think outside the box, because I think what's happened and what really spawned this is that people are so frustrated because there's no way to stop it. There just isn't. Reporting people, they just go and they change their username, they change their screen name, they change their gamer tag. There's no way to stop this, and I think this is one of those things where people just became so frustrated over something that they're like, you know what? There's all kinds of flaws in this plan, but we've got to try to do something.
Yeah, let's do, I guess, like... That's too bad.
What's too bad?
Just that the bully hunter joined the terrorists.
Right, you would think that if they were going to use footage, it would have been...
I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. This is where this is supposed to be the live hit right here.
Right.
And I guess a lot of people who watch this felt that there's something about it that makes it come off as fake.
Well, now it's frozen, so I don't know what is happening here.
Well,
I guess they're freezing it to show B-roll.
Yeah, okay. So what you do is you go to their site, you quote unquote hire. You don't have to pay anyone, by the way. It's not like I just said hire as a phrase. You don't actually pay money for it. You go, you hire somebody, you become friends on Steam, and then you invite the bully hunter into the game that you're in. And you let them know, obviously, who the player was, who was harassing you, and then they just go after them.
I mean, it's also kind of indicative more of, like, how poorly actual game companies are handling this kind of behavior.
When you're at the point where you got to take it upon yourself.
Someone thought this was a way to do this. You know, it's in the same way that Batman says very poor things about the Gotham City Police Department.
Right. You just reach a point of desperation after a while.
Yeah.
And you're like, what else can we do? If they're not going to solve it, we're going to try to solve it. And I admire that they tried to solve it, but this is not the way. There's the statement they put out. Harassment is not a game. They look at him clapping. I mean, that looked a little fake to me. You had the one guy who's just standing there not moving, and they come up and knife him from behind.
Right.
Like,
I mean, a demo's a demo.
Yeah.
And still rings a little truer than some of that TeamSpeak chat in Ubisoft games at E3.
That's true.
No, I mean, I guess, like, they were right in the sense that, you know, we heard about it, we're talking about it. Like, it made an impact in the sense of, like, we're aware of all these people now. I don't know if that helps their end game at all.
Well, there is no end game now. So
they shut it down?
Yeah, they lost all their sponsors. Their website is now gone. If you go to the URL that you've been seeing on the screen, it's just
nothing there.
Goes to, like a 505 or whatever.
It's open.
Go grab it. So it looks like a ton of people put a ton of money into this, and it lasted all of like 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
And is that a win for the people who harass people online? Does that embolden them, Matt?
I don't know. Like I have trouble getting into the thought processes of someone that like
does that in the first place.
Does that as a regular hobby anyway.
Right.
I mean, which might be just a shortcoming of my long-standing inability to really kind of grasp that idea. Like, and I say that as like and I've had some people say, well, you just don't understand. Like, you've never understood like why people would be mean. I'm like, I'm mean all the time. Like, but I just don't like that's a different kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everybody's mean. Yeah. That's just human nature. There's a difference between just occasionally getting miffed and being mean to somebody and what these people do to people online. It's a whole other league. But I think one thing you have to realize with something like this is, it was a bad idea and it failed, but it's kind of one of those situations where you just got to keep throwing crap against the wall and see what eventually sticks. If you're not trying, you're never going to find a solution. Yeah,
and to me, I guess maybe the most positive outcome would be to maybe holding up a giant flag that says, hey, game companies, do something.
I mean, isn't that what they're kind of doing?
I guess so, but like...
I mean, Valve, where's Valve?
You can't police your game if you're buried in money.
Yeah, they can't. They're so buried in money, they can't see out of it so they can see what's going on.
They can't see anything, being harassed by all these Benjamin Franklins.
Yeah.
They just won't let me back to my computer. I'm going to swim through them like Scrooge McDuck.
I just think this is going to be a problem that's going to continue to be a problem.
Oh yeah,
forever until there's
and women will continue to just not announce they're women or pretend to be boys or not use voice chat and they will
play games
or not play games. They will have a subpar experience compared to the rest of us because a subset of people cannot be human beings about it.
And I mean, that lack of revenue hurts everybody. That's less money going into the industry. That's less money to invest in new game development. It's less money to invest in online infrastructure. It kills all of us. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Luckily, I don't think I've ever met somebody who is this way. And maybe that's part of the problem is that these people aren't meeting anybody. I just can't understand why people would do this. But, and to your point earlier about they're kind of getting what they want now. They're getting attention. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately probably what they're looking for in the first place. So, I don't know what the solution is. Very frustrating, though. I mean, I'm not even a female, but just knowing that they have to go through this crap is insane. Like, imagine just going on and playing a game online and somebody just yelling at you because of your gender. Like, imagine if it was flipped and, like, we go and play, like, you dumb dude. Like, if they were just, like, going off on us because we're guys. Like, it's just, we can't fathom it because we've always been, like, the privileged sex.
Because we're very different. That'd be a very different society.
It absolutely would, for sure. So, I don't know. I guess I give the thumbs up to Bully Hunters for what they were trying to do. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I think their plan and their execution was flawed from the beginning. And then ultimately, their execution doomed them in the end. So, I hope this doesn't discourage somebody else who's out there working on an idea to try to curb this stuff from doing it.
I wouldn't. I mean, unless they had the same idea. I don't think that would...
I think the chances of that are pretty slim. So, and some people have said it was like a money grab, that somehow they were going to generate revenue from this.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that would come from. Or, I mean, I guess I could see it as some kind of publicity stunt, but I don't see what the end game was.
I don't...
I don't know what if it was there, it was so opaque that I didn't get it.
Yeah, it definitely went over my head if it was ever there in the first place. So I don't know why. I don't know why these sponsors got involved and didn't vet the whole process or think the whole process through. Because
I mean, I think that all the time about anything that where people say weird stuff on social media. You're like, do you see what happened to the last 4 people that said the N-word on a stream? Like what?
Why would you say it?
Yeah. Why would you? I mean, even if that is something you say all the time in real life, and you're a horrible person for that, but like.
You should at least be smart enough to know.
You got to know not to just like blurt out ethnic slurs, in public, in a recordable medium and on Twitter. It's like, are you not paying attention? Do you not see what happens?
Do you not like all that money you're making from YouTube or Twitch right now?
It's amazing.
Like, isn't that enough for you to like curb your behavior when you go in front of public? I don't get it either. But
so I don't know. Like it's you'd think that it's in the same. I'm not saying that this was as bad as something like that, but it's just like that thing of like, did you maybe watch kind of social media behavior and trends over the last few months and just sort of say like, hey, if we do something weird like this, there's a good chance that people could freak out and it could backfire.
Well, I think what's most surprising to me is that they put out the trailer explaining what they were, and then a couple days later they did the stream. Well, nothing changed from the trailer to the stream. What they talked about in the trailer is exactly what they did in the stream. And yet, after the stream, the sponsors drop them and they're like gone.
Well, did they make a statement as to why that happened?
No, like I searched all over.
Is it possible that the harassing people like went directly after all the sponsors because they saw a bunch of women trying to take charge of something?
It's possible. I don't even know.
Like I don't think we have transparency on exactly why they shut everything down.
No, I don't. Like I went to the website today and it was gone, and I was like, "What the heck? Like it's gone already?" And I'd seen some of the brushback after the live stream, people saying it was like all, it was garbage and it was a hoax or whatever, and I'd seen that.
That's the thing is, like, I mean, it does look kind of staged in the presentation,
absolutely.
But a hoax, like, for what?
Yeah, why?
Like I don't understand what like usually a hoax has an end game to kind of like some kind of financial benefit or some kind of like there's some kind of goal that the hoaxer has in mind. Even if it's just making a fool out of a bunch of people.
I think they're saying the stream itself was a hoax. It wasn't really working. That it was all staged and pre-recorded and all that stuff.
Well, I guess so, but it's like that happens. Like that's not really
a lot more than people want to admit.
It's not really what a hoax is.
It's not.
It's.
And I still don't get why people are saying, "Oh, it was a money grab," and they're trying to generate revenue off of this. I don't know where they would get money from this.
Or unless they mean that organization was a money grab from the sponsors they got, but you think that that's kind of on the sponsors. Why do you care whether the sponsors?
Well, it's also a .org, which means it can't turn a profit. So.
Yeah, people still get paid for working at it, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess you could just write yourself a check for $2 million and be like, "That's my salary."
In theory, I mean, there are less reputable organizations that do something like that. I don't know if that's the kind of money we're dealing with here.
No, definitely not. I was just being a little exaggerated.
But at the same time, there is kind of a tendency of the internet to accuse anything they don't fully understand immediately as being some kind of insidious conspiracy.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And if you don't have it all buttoned up when you do something like this, then...
And if you don't believe me, go look at Twitter discussing the Dark Souls Switch delay.
Yeah.
Who knew so many shady characters lurked in the hallways of Bandai Namco?
Yeah, it's a conspiracy.
Secretly plotting to annihilate the spirits and goodwill of Nintendo fans everywhere.
And obliterate Nintendo's business.
Yes.
So funny. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about something that might get us fired up, too. So Konami has been sitting on its IP for what's it been now? 2.5, 3 years? Ever since we started Sifted, actually. Because when we started Sifted, Metal Gear Solid 5 came out like right after that. And Konami hasn't really released a proper game since then. We got Super Bomberman R, and that's really the only console game that Konami has released since Metal Gear Solid 5. Well, Pro Evolution Soccer, I guess. And people are like, "What are you doing with Castlevania?" Meanwhile, there are more Castlevania clones than you can shake a stick at.
Right.
Like every other indie game now is a Castlevania.
They made that pachinko game.
Right. That's true.
Pretty good music.
Yeah. And so people are always wondering, what's Konami doing with all these IPs it's sitting on? Well, then this week it finally announced a new Castlevania game, and as it turns out, it's a mobile game. And people are flipping out. It's called Castlevania Grimoire of Souls. I'm wondering if that's a nod to the franchise that has kind of borrowed the Castlevania aesthetic over the last 5 years.
What?
The Souls franchise.
Eh.
I mean, I think you said it too. That the Dark Souls is kind of like the modern Castlevania.
I mean, Bloodborne even more so because of the aesthetic. But yeah.
But people are freaking out over this. Why? I honestly don't have a huge problem. I mean, to me,
it's not what they wanted.
But I could play in a Castlevania game on a mobile phone. Doesn't seem all that crazy to me.
It's not just that it's a mobile game, it's that it's a 4-player competitive /co-op game that nobody wants. Like, that's not what Castlevania is to anybody.
It's like an all-star, all the stars from past Castlevania games are in this game.
I mean, they pretty much did that before with whatever that was on the 360 arcade, Harmony of Dissonance.
Oh, right.
Or I don't remember, Harmony of Despair, maybe, or something like that. But it was like a 4-player game, and it was like 2D Castlevania with 4-player co-op, and you could pick different characters from the series, and you ran around, and it was like basically Iga's like last shot at making something successful before they canned him.
Yeah.
And it apparently did not work out, at least not as well as the Mercury Steam games, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
So it's been done before to some degree. I played a fair amount of that game back in the day. It was not amazing, but it was fine. It was better than nothing. But I think you also got Castlevania fans are in general going to be more traditional gamers, and they don't want to play stuff like this on a phone. It's not even the first Castlevania phone game. I mean, I had one that was like a match 3 game for a while, which also had really good music. It's like a watchword for Castlevania, really good music. But sure.
It does kind of make you wonder, though, why Konami wouldn't just make it for Switch. And look, I'm guessing a Switch port is probably already in development.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that. I mean, again, like if you want to release something like this, it's way easier to put it out on iOS than it is to work with Nintendo and like deal
cheaper
with that.
too.
Much cheaper.
You don't have to pay the licensing fees to Nintendo
so
for every
it could
sale.
just be a simple thing, as simple as like, okay, we're going to do this thing on iOS and we'll see if it's successful. We'll hold it up to Nintendo and see if they bite, basically, which they probably will. They need content, but it also kind of depends how robust it is. Like, who knows? Like, it could be something you could only really sell in like a digital store.
Is it free to play?
I don't know if they would. I don't know if we know that yet.
It might be.
Chances are. I mean, certainly, like I think, the free to play model, and you just sell power-ups or gems or whatever,
new characters
like that. Yeah.
So it's a 4-player cooperative when you play the campaign, and there's also a 4 versus 4 multiplayer head-to-head option.
Curious how that works.
Yeah. I don't know. It's coming pretty soon. Like, you can sign up right now to kind of get in the alpha or the beta. So it shouldn't. I don't think it's that far away. It shouldn't take too long before we kind of find out what the story is with it. But I don't know. It seems like everyone's up in arms over this, and I'm just kind of like, whatever. It doesn't really bother me.
It's just more evidence that the Konami's properties are not going to be leveraged in the way that we as your typical core gamers want them to be.
I don't look at a mobile game as keeping me away from a console Castlevania, though.
I think you do if it's modern Konami.
Yeah.
Like, this is what they're making now. Like, this is that. You get this shit like this and shit like Metal Gear Survive, and that's it.
I mean, the other thing too is
like,
that
it's like you can't look at Metal Gear Survive and be disappointed by it and be like, well, the next Metal Gear game, because there is no next Metal Gear game. They're not going to do that. They're not going to make a console Castlevania game.
I think the other thing too is that Konami's a business, and as a business, Konami is doing very, very well. Its financials, since it kind of bailed on the whole console thing, have just skyrocketed. It is managing its business very well, and I know people want to believe that these publishers are their friends, when they're fans of Nintendo or whatever, that they romanticize these companies and think that they actually care about them. But ultimately, they'll care about them if caring about them will generate revenue. And if it doesn't, they're not going to do it. It's all about, I mean, at the end of the day...
And at the same time, like, well, then maybe their revenue would have been better if they were making better games. And they just sort of walked away from that. And that's how it is now. Oh, well.
I mean, Konami made pretty good games before it bailed on the console space.
Somewhat. They didn't, you had a lot of situations where they clearly just weren't interested in that world anymore. Like, they wouldn't let Kojima, I mean, not that they didn't have their reasons, because Kojima was running the budget to the sky. But
for the 5th time.
Yeah, but they wouldn't let him, Metal Gear Solid 5 is an unfinished game. It's very clear it's an unfinished game.
Absolutely.
They had all the problems with Lords of Shadow 2, and nobody really seems to be clear on whether that was Konami or whether it was Mercury Steam, the leader of Mercury Steam, who seemed to be a little unhinged in places.
That guy.
Or a combination of both, or maybe Konami's behavior was making him having to cut corners and be weird about that. I mean, look, there was a stealth sequence in that where you had to stealth around as a mouse in fog. Very weird. Not what I was expecting as a sequel to that.
Yeah, there were some questionable decisions made with that game for sure.
I think I'm sure there's people that just wish they would like license out Castlevania to a company that does want to make a robust full game. I mean,
which it could totally do that.
Not to continue jumping the gun, but it's like imagine taking the template of the new God of War game and making a Castlevania game that's like that.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
But
there's only so many developers in the world that can do that.
True, but see if they're interested.
Yeah.
Shop your stuff around.
Konami may have. You don't know.
Yeah.
It could have shopped all this stuff around, and people are just like, nah. Because you want to. you want to create your own IP so you make all the money off of it. You want to have control over what you do with that IP going forward.
Well, and that's why you have the so many kickstarted Castlevania likes,
right?
Happening, Bloodstained
or Metroid likes as well.
Metroid, because like they're just not that audience is not being served by by Nintendo and Konami.
Yeah,
who are the two companies that make those games,
right?
And so you've got like. Yeah, and I think the independent stuff is actually filling that niche pretty well. There's been some pretty good Metroidvanias that have popped up. I mean, in
a lot of cases, they're better than the last Metroid that came out.
I mean, certainly you've got advocates of that Metroid remake, the Metroid 2 remake, that the fan made versus the one that Nintendo
ultimately ended up coming out officially. Yeah,
which was Mercury Steam, who made the Lords of Shadow games.
Yeah, and they also made a handheld version of Castlevania before they made the big one.
An integral.
Is it dual release? Was it? No.
No, it was on DS or 3DS first, and then it came to consoles later.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the name of it. It began with eight. It was another HD one.
It was Mirror of Fate.
Mirror of Fate. That's right. Mirror of Fate. That was about Trevor and Alucard and stuff, and a lot of fans didn't like the direction they took that.
Will you play this mobile Castlevania?
Probably not.
You won't?
Like, I mean, I don't...
I absolutely will.
Maybe if it's free. I don't know. Like, I'm not a mobile game.
I would pay up to $5 probably to buy it.
I'll wait and see what you say.
Yeah. You'll let me make the sacrifice with the $5.
Yeah, I don't... I mean, also, I'm a Castlevania, like, Metroidvania fan. Like, I'm not a big fan of the original kind of, hard as nails action game version.
Yeah.
So this isn't that enticing to me, and also the last thing I want to do in Castlevania is play with other people.
Yeah.
Like the Metroidvania genre to me is like part of the appeal is sort of the solo loneliness sort of like exploration thing.
Yeah.
And if you're just hopping around like crazy people, like which is what that 360 version was,
right.
Like it was fun enough playing with my friends, but it wasn't Castlevania.
Yeah.
Like so.
I'm gonna wait. I mean, they haven't even shown a trailer for it yet. Obviously, we haven't been showing you guys a trailer for it, so they haven't released it yet. So there's been a couple screenshots that have been put out, but they're all low res. So we weren't gonna run them. So I'm gonna withhold judgment until I finally see the game in motion and learn a little bit more about it. But I mean, just knowing the details that have been released so far, I'm interested, and I will absolutely, if it's free, I will absolutely download and play it. And if it's not free, I would probably be willing to spend up to about $5 to give it a whirl. So Castlevania is deep rooted in my gamer heart. It is. It is one of the first games that I became just hopelessly addicted to. And then later on in life, like in college, like I had my Super Nintendo in our apartment, and like I remember my roommates who weren't gamers at all, like picking up, getting bored and being like, hey, here's Shane's Super Nintendo, and like started playing Castlevania. And then I get up for class the next day and I come out to the living room and he's like, bro, I haven't stopped playing. I played all night. And so there's very special memories for me for this franchise, and so I think I'll always give it a chance. Like, for instance, I actually enjoyed Castlevania 64, where most people hate it. And
that's your problem.
It is. It absolutely is. Like I am willing to admit
there is actually a weird upsurge among the Castlevania fandom of like Castlevania 64 is an underappreciated gem.
Really?
And they're wrong because it's terrible. But like there's sort of that thing of like now that it's gone, everybody's like, no, there wasn't too bad.
I'm willing to admit that most people probably think that game sucks, but I enjoyed it because I just like that franchise so much.
Well, go play it again.
No, I know it's
Try
not.
Again.
I know it'd be hard to get through without a doubt. I remember like that hedge maze part.
Hedge maze was difficult. The little update thing they did, Legacy of Darkness, where you could play the werewolf. That was a little better. They refined it a little bit. That would be a patch now. That would just been a patch. But back then you had to release a whole new cartridge.
Well, that was one of those games that was marketed for like 2 years before it ever came out. It was in every magazine.
Oh, like the first wave of Ultra 64. It was like, oh, Castlevania's coming to the Ultra 64. Oh, yeah.
And then we got it. Again, I didn't think it was a great game, but I enjoyed it because I love the license so much.
Yeah, I did not enjoy that game. I mean,
I think you fall in with most people.
I was like, oh, like the fourth or fifth time I had to fight that giant gorilla skeleton. I was like, oh, I missed a platform again. And that was also part of the things like, on the N64 where you had those sort of like half-assed attempts to move 2D games into that 3D space.
Right.
And the system launched with Mario 64, where I never had a problem landing on the damn platform I wanted to jump to, and all of a sudden you get playing this stuff, it's like the camera's over here, your guy's over here, you're falling off to your death. I was like, no, I'm not doing this.
Well, if there's no shadow and no lighting, you had like no chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Remember one of the innovations of Metroid Prime was that when you jumped, it automatically sort of tilted the camera down so you could see where your feet were.
Yeah.
Like something as simple as that wasn't in place until the early 2000s.
It's pretty crazy. It's hard to believe. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about probably the biggest story of the week.
Yeah, if you don't count like game releases, I guess. Yeah.
Obviously, God of War coming out is the biggest
like announcements
thing
and stuff,
that happened. Sure. But the biggest announcement this week, undoubtedly, was that remasters are coming for Shenmue 1 and 2 to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Is it coming to PC?
Yes.
It is PC. Mm-hmm. So Switch was left out.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure the Nintendo fans were really happy about.
Oh, yeah. Of course they were. They didn't want that anyway.
Yeah, that's what they say. We didn't want it anyway.
I mean, you might not.
Actually,
really. And I'm speaking as someone who not only loves Shenmue and has every version ever released for every platform, but has a signed poster of it on my wall. I don't know if you're really missing that much if you didn't play it back in the day. If you haven't played it, if you don't have any nostalgia for this series, man,
this
is going to be a tough haul.
It's tough to get through. Yeah. In
part because as we were talking about before the show, like games just don't move at the pace of Shenmue anymore. If they ever did.
Well, you're not talking about necessarily about how the game itself is paced, but literally
how
long it takes to pick something up.
I'm not talking about like the narrative, because like look, the first game is just chapter 1, which was pure act 1. By the time the story gets going in the first game is over.
Yeah, you're right.
He finally gets on the boat going to China. You're like, all right, now credits.
That's the end.
Because Yu Suzuki was trying to start he was trying to start the episodic game. Like it was going to be a 16 chapter, meaning 16 game series. And after chapter 1, it became very clear that you cannot make 16 of the most expensive game ever made at that point.
Particularly when it sells 800,000 copies.
Yeah. So Shenmue 1 is all chapter 1 of the story. Shenmue 2 is chapters, I think, 2 through 5. So Shenmue 2 moves like a bat narratively.
Relatively speaking.
But the problem is, the game is so slow. And I don't mean slow in the sense that it takes forever things to happen. I mean, you press the button, he looks down, he reaches down, he picks up the orange, you turn the orange, you move the orange the other way, you say, okay, put the orange down because there's nothing you can do with the frickin' orange but look at it.
And then he slowly puts it back down.
And then he slowly puts it back down and then stands back up, and then the camera changes and now you can play again. And it's and that's how everything in this game works. And I don't know. I don't know how modern audiences who have never played this series will react to it. And that's the most interesting thing about this remaster to me is going to be, how will someone who has never played Shenmue and only heard about it through reputation, and its reputation's really good among people who love it, how are you going to react to playing this game and being like, what?
It could make for some really interesting streams.
Oh, the Let's Plays are going to be amazing, especially from I want to see Let's Plays from people who weren't born when Shenmue 1 came out. 18-year-old kids and stuff.
Right. Well, I'm sure a lot of people watched. I mean, that Easy Allies thing.
Oh, yeah.
That came out when Shenmue 3 was announced, and they flipped out and it did millions of views or whatever. People are going to remember that when they play this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, wait a minute.
I mean, I don't react to anything like that. But I was that excited for sure.
I was excited for sure.
And then I thought about it some more, and I was like, I don't know. Look, I love these games. I played them both again on my Dreamcast about 2 summers ago. I replayed them because I got the VGA HDMI converter box thing for my Dreamcast, and they look good. They actually look good through that. They're gonna look okay. When they, even if they're just, I don't know what they're running on for this remaster. I guess they're probably just making them widescreen and running through an emulator or something.
Well, I mean, the confusing part is, Sam, if you'll go back and roll that trailer again, parts of the trailer are 4:3, and then parts of it are 16:9.
Some of it, I'm sure the stuff that was that's not real time, they probably just made it 4:3. This is a cutscene, a pre-recorded cutscene, so I'm sure that this is.
There's nothing they can do with those, right?
Right. They'd have to re-render them all in engine, and
that's not happening.
So this is all actual gameplay.
Yeah.
So, that makes more sense. Also, I think Shenmue 2 did have a 16:9 option because they remade it for the Xbox. The original Xbox.
Right. Visually, it doesn't look like much has been done.
Not too much. I mean, it looks like they've just sort of cleaned it up because it is jaggy when you blow it up to a modern resolution. It needs some serious anti-aliasing. The textures need some help. So it looks like that's happening here. But they're not touching the gameplay. They're not touching how everything functions. It sounds like
There's
there
going to
might
be an alternate control scheme,
which they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's just not how 3D motion is done anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing about Shenmue is like, Shenmue came out in 1999.
Yeah.
And it was originally planned for the Saturn. Like, this thing was way ahead of its time. Ahead of its time to the point that we hadn't quite figured out how 3D adventure, third-person action
certainly
games
didn't
worked.
know how open world games were going to work.
And in the original controls, you steered him. You literally steered him with the one analog stick, and you could push forward to make him walk, but a little bit to kind of fine tune him. But to actually move forward and walk at normal speed and run, you had to hold the right trigger.
Yeah.
And then kind of steer him using that. It
was kind of like tank controls.
It was like a slight evolution of the old Resident Evil controls.
It's like the trigger was like the gas button on a car.
Yeah, it was a little like steering a car.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ryo kind of has the personality of a car in places. So that's they're not. I assume they're not redoing the dubbing, which was all done. It was done.
I don't think they should.
No, probably not. The dubbing was done in Japan by a voiceover studio that does English dubs.
I think they're going to have the Japanese option in the Western version.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Because it's actually done by the same dub company and dub actors as the English version of Iron Chef.
Interesting.
In fact, if I remember correctly, the guy the guy on the floor in Iron Chef, who in the middle of everybody talking will suddenly interrupt and be like, "Goy-san," like that guy.
Yeah.
I believe that is the dorky other student.
Oh, really?
In Shenmue, because there's another student of your father in Shenmue, whose name I can't remember, but he helps you train and stuff, and he's just a giant dork, and he's kind of like this weird little dude who helps you train and stuff, and he's super weirdly subservient to you and stuff. It's very weird. I think that's the same voice actor, but you've just got adult actors raising their voice a couple octaves to try to be children, and the famous one where one of the first kids you run into running out of your house in the first game says, "Hey, mister, want to wrestle?" It's just what?
Oh, no, some of the lines in that game are just what?
Well, a lot of it is because it was translated and not localized, so there's things where that would make sense if you were saying them in Japanese in context, but in English it's just do you remember that day? That day, the day of the incident where the snow turned to rain. Yes, that is the day. It's just what is this?
What?
It's weird and stilted and kind of adds to the sort of
the aura.
The aura. Yeah. It's like watching Akira with the original streamlined dub from the 80s.
Yeah. That's a good analogy.
It's charming, and it's the whole reason to watch that is Cam Clark hamming it up as Kaneda, but would you call it good voice acting? No, but it's way more memorable than the quote-unquote good dub they did in the 2000s.
I think that's probably the most puzzling thing to me is how much this announcement made an impact across social media. But people forget that this isn't the first time that these games have been revived for a current console. They've actually been available for a while. Yeah, isn't Shenmue 1 and 2, aren't they available on Xbox or whatever? Shenmue 2 is, I guess.
Shenmue 2, they made a Shenmue 2 for the original Xbox.
Right. And they never did the first one.
They never did the first one.
Okay.
If you want to play the first one,
That's really bizarre that they only made the second one. I mean, the second one never came out here.
Right. So the second one came out in Japan on the Dreamcast and came out in Europe on the Dreamcast.
Right.
And never made it to America. And so the Xbox version was the only way to play the sequel in America, unless I imported the European version because the European version is subtitled. And then the Xbox version was the only way to play it dubbed in English, which used the same dub team. There's a weird, I can't quite remember what the deal is. There's a weird thing in Shenmue 2 where one of the characters in Japan is a man. It's a cross-dresser, and so she presents as a woman, but in Japan she's voiced by a male actor. And in the European version, which was subtitled, they had them redub her with a female Japanese voice actress.
Wow.
And then in America, she's voiced by a woman voice actor in English. So that's one of the only times I think I've ever heard of a localization redubbing a character with a different voice actor in the original language.
Yeah, that is strange.
Which is weird.
Well, they must have just known it. It was in it. And it's saying it's bad in the pantheon of voice acting in Shenmue, that is saying something.
Well, I don't know, because it was, her. I don't know what the performances are like in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese.
Right.
I'm sure it was fine, but it was just like one of those, like, oh, we can't have a cross-dressing man in a game because of reasons. So they just did that. On the flip side, they did release Shenmue USA in Japan on the Dreamcast, which is the first game with the English dub, because apparently Yu Suzuki thought it was better than the Japanese version. And
so maybe the voice acting in Japanese isn't so good.
Yeah, well, it's either that or like the thing where, like, when you watch dubbed or the dub versus sub thing, where it's like, oh, subbed is way better. Well, subbed is better because you just hear the tone of the language being spoken, you don't understand it, and then you read the subtitle and your brain makes it not stupid. Like your brain basically makes the dialogue work because you're reading it to yourself like a book. Like, you don't read a book and be like, that delivery of that line was bad. Because in your head, it just makes it work.
You think it sounds good. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how subtitles help make something like a little better. Is like, if you don't understand the language being spoken, you don't know if someone's really acting badly unless it's really over the top. So I think the reverse happened there with Shenmue USA, where it's like, oh, that sounds better because maybe who knows who they got to voice the Japanese. But it's weird because like Metal Gear Solid had a similar thing happen where Kojima released a USA English version in Japan with the English voice actors, who were, I think, way better than the Shenmue English voice actors.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's an element to that where, like, Kojima's kind of trying to make an American movie, like a John Carpenter film, basically, usually, which are in English, which are seen in English in Japan, and also like the characters in Metal Gear would be speaking English. Shenmue clearly not. Takes place entirely in a small town in Japan, right. And like the idea that he thought that would be better in English was weird to me.
Are you gonna play these again?
Yeah.
I don't think I will, honestly.
Well, I mean, you should, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll let you play it, and then I'll ask you all the questions.
I don't know. I think we need to see. We need to see your reaction to picking one of these things up. Almost 20 years later, 19 years later.
I don't know. It was a struggle.
I mean, I'm not saying you got to finish them. I'm just saying, like, you should play an hour or so of Shenmue 1 and see how far you get, or at least how many capsule toys you collect.
I will say this much. That trailer reminded me of how great the music is in Shenmue.
And I think the other thing that I think is...
Because the music in that game is,
music
even today, is still amazing.
And the other thing I think... God, Rio is such a doofus.
Yeah.
Like, one of my other favorite lines...
Brown leather jacket.
One of my other favorite moments in the sequel is he gets in this big fight with the one girl, I think Joy is her name. She's got the red hair and she rides a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And she's
like the big character in the second
she's very big, a very prominent character. And she almost like runs him over and she's like,
I remember this.
And she's like, "Are you crazy? You're gonna run over?" And he just goes, "Where's Wanzai?" And because he's trying to find this place called Wanzai in town, and she goes, "What?" Like, it's like he's just a very single-minded man. Like he's got one thing on his mind.
I mean, look, this franchise has its charms. That's why it is maintained some level of cachet for almost 2 decades.
Yeah, just if you've never played it, you better be ready to
be prepared.
You're playing the equivalent of like a B movie at best.
Yeah.
Like think of it like you turning on an old like kung fu movie or something.
Yeah.
And the combat is pretty good. Like, the combat is derived from Virtua Fighter, and there's actually some meat to it.
Yeah.
And
some of those fights at the end of the first game I'll always remember those. They were tough.
And the choreography is like they did a lot of good motion capture stuff. This is real impressive for 1999.
Oh yeah, like absolutely. But that's why it cost so much money, and Sega lost its ass on the game.
The other thing that I think is driving this as kind of a big story is the idea of Sega finally doing some re-releases and some retro releases on something that happened after the Genesis.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, they have neglected their Saturn and Dreamcast libraries, more the Saturn, but like they've neglected a lot of these games for decades.
I mean, look, in my honest opinion, I would rather see a rework of Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Well, they'd have to recode that from the ground up. It's not because they lost the source code for that.
I
But,
think
like,
that game has enough cachet, though, that it would be worth the effort to
that was my
recode it.
favorite game for years.
Yeah.
It's still, it'd be probably my number 2, number 3 game of all time if I were going to make a list.
I think that, to me, would be worth the effort to build it from the ground up.
I agree. Panzer Dragoon Saga, like a Panzer Dragoon collection that includes Saga, would be one of the holy grails of like retro gaming.
Then the value of that game would just plummet, but I don't care because I don't own it.
I actually tried to replay that recently with because there's a decent Saturn emulator now where you just put the disc in the PC and it plays it.
Oh wow!
And like, there's really still not a whole lot you can do with Saturn textures.
Yeah,
like it's just
it would have to be rebuilt.
You have to rebuild it from the ground up. But I agree with you. I don't know what kind of money that would take, and I don't know if anyone would even care beyond that niche group that loves those games.
I think just as big a group would care about that as care about Shenmue.
Yeah, but Shenmue I think they just ran it through a filter and an emulator and called it a day.
Oh, yeah. It's a very quick and dirty. Yeah. It's not even a port, really.
No, it's a remaster. It counts as a remaster, but it's a remaster in the strictest sense of like, we are just up-resing what's already there to a modern resolution.
16:9.
Maybe you're
change the controls.
Maybe you're tweaking some stuff, but like basically, it's like, this is the game it was before. Just run through a better video output, essentially. Yep. The other game I would love to see from the old Sega days come back is Dragon Force.
Yeah.
Which it was a working designs release in America. Very few people played it. But I played that game for 200-300 hours in college. It got to the point where at one point my girlfriend at the time hid the disc. It was just like...
It's like how Pactor's wife called Fallout 3 that effing game.
Right. It was all I did. I went to class, I came home, I played Dragon Force. I played it because it was like 7 or 8 characters. You could go through the whole game. I went through with all of them, and then I started over again. Like, I loved that game more than
I would say the chances of that coming back...
Real slim.
to none.
Real slim.
Not going to happen.
But there's always the emulator.
That's true.
You just stick the disc in, and it plays. Pretty well. It's okay. It's a little hitchy here and there, but it works.
Yep.
It's better than not having it.
That's true. All right, let's move along. We're going to talk next about E3. What I've noticed is it's been really slow the first quarter of the year. Lots of podcasts have been talking about E3 for weeks, months, in a lot of cases.
Yeah. You can tell how desperate the first quarter is by how early the E3 hype starts.
Yeah. Or the Game of the Year talk. That's another thing I've seen on a lot of podcasts. Like, what are the early contenders for Game of the Year? It's like, bro, it's like March.
There's one.
Yeah.
And it came out today.
Yeah.
So.
And so E3 is coming up. It's like less than 2 months from now.
Yep.
It's coming up pretty quick, and we're starting to see the industry kind of get into gear. Microsoft yesterday announced its press conference is happening Sunday. Or is it Sunday or Monday?
I don't remember.
I can look it up real quick.
Probably Monday? Can't remember.
Ubisoft is doing its press conference the same time it always has. Probably the same location it always has as well.
You got something that works.
Yep. So the E3 machine is starting to get revved up. In fact, I just put in my press application this week. And so I thought we might at least address E3 and start getting sort of warmed up for it ourselves. Matt, what are you looking from E3 for this year?
I want to know what Bethesda's putting out this fall. They gotta have something.
They have to have something.
Some kind
of game. I'm talking more though about the show itself.
Oh. I don't know.
Were you happy with kind of how it was last year?
No, it was too crowded. I couldn't get anything. That was what last year. I think we said. I said this is the first year in 19 or some years ago, and that I skipped a day on the floor. I just couldn't take it. It was too much. It was too many people, and I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't see anything, so I just stayed in the Marriott all day and hung out with people.
Well, there's something to be
said about that, but I'm like, well, I got to go look at something because otherwise we don't have anything to talk about on the Friday show. So
yeah,
but I'm not looking forward to this one really, in the sense that I thought last year was a tough haul, and I wonder how it's going to work this time with the early entrance stuff. Will just create crowds of a different nature, as everybody rushes to try to see what they need to see before the public gets in. I don't know if that's going to help much.
I think it's going to be a huge help, in all honesty, because the last couple of years that the public has been in there, it was hard to formulate a plan because you knew no matter what day you went, no matter what time you went, it was going to be hard to get hands-on time with a game unless you wanted to wait in line, or you could just slide in if you knew a PR person and get in and see a demo. I think my biggest issue with the public being at E3, and Pactor and Marcus talked about this in a recent episode of Pactor Factor, I'm not as angry about the public being there as they are, but I think the biggest issue that I have is it's much harder to actually play games on the show floor now. The kiosks are all taken up, or you have to wait in a queue, or they give you like a lanyard or whatever for waiting in line, or you have to go into like this private demo booth where you sit and somebody else plays, and you don't get to play the game.
Yeah, last year, I don't think I played anything that wasn't something that I knew someone working on.
Yeah.
Like, it was literally like, hey, can I play the game you're making? And I'm like, sure. But it's like, if just as a normal attendee, like there was no hands-on time for anything because it was so crowded. I
waited a couple times. I would just run into people and be like, hey, how are you? He's like, oh, I was going to go play this. And we ended up standing in line and basically catching up while we were waiting to play stuff. But that was like it. Otherwise, getting time, because basically the only games that are out on the floor with kiosks are indie games. The small stuff. All the big stuff is in some theater somewhere.
Yeah, all the big stuff is a very controlled, driven demo.
Or there's a Nintendo where you have to wait.
Yeah, well, I don't even bother trying to play Nintendo stuff anymore unless I have a couple friends in Nintendo who, if I run into them, they'll get me back into the VIP section and I can play stuff. That's how I played Breath of the Wild for like the half-an-hour demo thing they did 2 years ago.
It's also weird looking at this B-roll and seeing the Xbox booth that we were just showing there and realizing that is not going to be there.
Yeah. There'll be some kind of Xbox presence, but it won't be.
It's just a live streaming lab, essentially, for Mixer. But their actual show floor presence...
I bet I know everyone who's producing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that'll be where I go to see my friends.
Pretty much, yeah, because what's their E3 show called? E3 Xbox Live
something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, all our friends end up working on
a lot of XG4 people work on that show.
Yeah, like Blair Butler is there, and Blair Herter used to be there. Probably won't be anymore.
Yeah, he still shows up sometimes. Probably not this now.
He's at IGN now, so he probably can't.
But they get a lot of hosts that we used to work with, and
Morgan I think does.
Morgan has.
Yeah. But she won't be this year either.
Chobot did a couple times.
But isn't it weird, though, there won't be a big Xbox? I mean, that's the first time in 15 years there won't be an Xbox booth?
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Changes. We'll see how it goes.
Well, EA's gone. I mean, that whole corner of that floor is empty now. Because it used to be Xbox, EA. And both those booths were huge.
Should just, fill that whole space with extra Nintendo kiosks.
Actually, you're right. Nintendo should just buy that space.
You gotta serve the people here, and there's just the furor over getting to play Nintendo stuff at this show has always been crazy, but the last 5 years have gotten to a point where I'm expecting someone to die.
Yeah.
It's insane. People running at full sprint from the opening of the doors to the Nintendo, but you're waiting for someone to trip and gouge their eye out on something. It's a disaster. And people, at one point last year, the year before, I think they were cutting off the line to play Zelda. I think 2 years ago, they're cutting the line off by 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And the show opens at 10.
Yeah.
I mean, it was if you weren't in line,
there was already more people
than they could get through. It was just you are not adequately showing your game at that point.
You're right. I think we're going to do coverage a little bit different this year. We're probably still going to do provided we have a place to do it, because this is the next to last episode here in our studio. But provided we have a place to do it, we'll probably still do the live press conference stuff the first couple days or whatever. But then I think once the show kicks off, I think we're actually going to do show floor coverage this year. And the last couple years, we did the master stream where we'd go and grab everyone's streams using the TriCaster, and just basically people would be like, hey, I want to watch this, and we just flip around and put it. But last year, our audience had fallen. So I think we're actually going to do some show floor coverage this year and get out there. And I think a lot of it will be community-based, not necessarily talking to a lot of developers or publisher folks, but talking to the people who go to the show. Talking to the people in line at Nintendo and asking them what are they thinking.
Way near the back. How much did you spend to be here this week, and is it worth it?
Is it worth sitting in this line for the next 5 hours to get to play whatever Pokemon for 30 minutes and get your Pokemon hat or backpack or bag or whatever it is they're going to give you? I want to try to kind of take that community angle with the show this year. At least one of the days that I go on the show for to do coverage. And then maybe just kind of pick and choose what publishers and developers we decide to talk to. But yeah, I think I want to get out. Well, obviously, I have to get out of here because I have to get out of here in like 2 weeks. But I want to get out on the show floor and do some coverage out there this year. So we're going to do things maybe a little bit differently.
Still do the press conference thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still want to do like the hangout for the press conferences where we sit with the sifters and we watch them together and then we do some commentary afterwards. I want to do that, but generally we do that before the show even starts. And then you would go and like go to the floor and do your thing, and I would end up being here all day, basically sitting and being a human TriCaster, like going through 5 streams, and someone says, "Hey, Capcom is showing this right now. Flip over," and I would flip over to that. It's actually a great idea, but the first year it did well as far as audience. The second year it didn't do anywhere near as well. So I want to switch it up and try some new things and do some things differently. We're not going to just do the generic developer interviews that we had done at GT for 7 years, and we had done at GameSpot before that, and G4 before that. We still want to try to keep with our mantra of if we can't do it differently, we won't do it. But people aren't really taking the community angle at E3. It's always about like the publishers, the developers, and the games, which I totally get. But that stuff's all being done by 30 or 40 different outlets. So I want to try to find a different angle to kind of cover the show this year. And I think I'll figure out some way to do it that'll be different and it'll still kind of have that sifted spin on it. So are you excited for E3 2018? Because we're kind of in that end of generation mode where a lot of it's going to take something extreme to really impress us, like graphically with a game. I think we've been to the point where they've kind of wrung the genres dry for a while now. Battle Royale, I guess, would be the one exception to that. But I haven't really seen a new genre since like Skyrim and stuff like that really hit.
I don't really care about new genres. I care about refinement. I care about. That's why I feel like this should be the midpoint of the generation. I feel like we should be.
Well, like if you go by the PlayStation schedule, it is. I mean, PS3 was out there for like 8 years, and we're at year 4.
Well, I think we're finally starting, between Horizon last year, God of War this year, Spider-Man coming up in September, I think you're finally starting to see the PlayStation really sing.
No, you're right. You're
on all cylinders. Right. And, like, I don't see any reason to cut that short right now. Like, let these things ride for a few more years.
Yeah.
And, like, certainly Microsoft can't have any interest in jumping the gun. They've got the most powerful system right now.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I have only played games that were at least 2 years old or 3 years old or more on it so far, but it runs that old stuff real well.
I bet it does.
I've been playing before God of War came out. I was playing Witcher 3 again for the 3rd time on Xbox One X, and I'll tell you, looks and runs as good as my PC.
Really?
60 frames a second, 4K HDR, like it looks gorgeous.
Wow.
It runs gorgeous. It's every bit the equal of playing it on my super powerful PC. Obviously,
that you spent 3 times or 4 times
obviously
more
it's 3 years later.
Yeah.
But like, still, that's a box and a half.
You can
right
get
there.
that experience now in a console.
Yeah, like it's
that's a
beautiful.
big deal.
And like again, like one of my friends was over and saw it and was just like, and looked at that and looked at God of War on the Pro and was just like, how in the world can you say we need new consoles?
Yeah.
When we have things that look like this right now. Like and Witcher 3 is 3 years old. Or look at Red Dead Redemption, which you load. That's an 8-year-old game, and it looks amazing. I mean, for what it is, it looks amazing with the new update they did. It's great.
Absolutely.
Like, so, I think there's a lot of life left in these consoles, and there's no reason to jump the gun on new hardware.
Everyone's always just wants the next big thing.
Yeah, I know, but like the next.
I think the truth is that the next thing may not be all that big.
Right.
It's hard to get the leaps that we're used to seeing.
Yeah,
anymore.
like I say don't jump to a new, especially if you're going to jump to a new number. First off, I like that Xbox, the Xbox guys are finally saying like, we recognize the importance of taking your library with you, basically. Like you buy, because that's another.
That is one thing Microsoft has done exceptionally well this generation.
And
it hasn't done a lot very well,
but they've seen that
thing.
And they've kind of like found this sort of like alternate route that like, well, we can't make, we're having trouble getting new stuff out.
So let's just make sure people
But what if we just
make
make all the stuff everybody already has really good?
Yeah.
And like, I'm not saying it's making them a ton of money, but like I'm having a really good time playing these old games.
But I think at this point, where Microsoft is at in Generation 8, it would be happy to just make players happy.
Yeah.
Because it is really kind of like, it's in 3rd place. I mean, let's be honest. Xbox is in 3rd place. And at this point...
Not in February, it wasn't.
Yeah, but I mean, just in general. But
Switch is about to pass them, I think, if you extrapolate out the way the system's been selling.
Yeah.
They're about to be more Switches sold than Xbox Ones.
Yeah, and I just think at this point, Microsoft needs to worry about keeping its existing customer base happy, so they will at least consider the next box.
Yeah, well,
from Microsoft.
Well, I'll tell you, if the next Xbox, whenever that comes out or whatever it is, that comes out and everything I own on the Xbox One and everything can just be moved right up
and
forward.
My 360 and
all that stuff I already own, like disc-wise or digitally, just moves up to the next system and it looks better and plays better and runs smoother. Yeah, that's a big incentive. And like Sony should be paying attention because like you're building this huge library now of Sony games through the PlayStation Plus and the free game stuff they offer and just sort of like the remasters they're coming out with, and like you don't want to make people start that library over on the PS5. Like you want to keep that moving. Everyone's got the architecture that can just keep moving forward now. And I think
the problem is Sony has it in the past, and that's what's really killing it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the PS4 Pro is a good indication that they understand that.
Yeah.
And
it's going to be that way going forward.
I think that's what you have to do now. I mean, and I think you're even starting to see that with Switch. I would be very surprised. Nintendo's done that in the past with the DS model, obviously.
And the consoles. I mean, the Wii played GameCube.
We played that. Yeah, I'm sure if there was a disc slot somewhere on the Switch, feasibly, you could still play.
Right. Architecture-wise, it probably would still work. Yeah.
So I'll be shocked if the successor to the Switch does not have a Switch card port.
Yeah.
If it even has a different kind of card, who knows?
Yeah.
But I think letting people take their games with them to the next generation is going to be a big watchword.
But Nintendo has been probably the worst at that because it wants you to keep buying those old retro games over and
to
over
some degree,
and
but
over again.
But also, like you're kind of torn there because on one hand, yes, it's annoying to have to pay again. On the other hand, on the Wii U, even. Okay, we pay $1 to upgrade this like virtual console game to Wii U version, so you don't have to load the Wii emulator to play it that way. It's like that's better than not giving it to me again.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening now.
I mean, what would be better is just giving it to you again.
Well, right, but like you can't ever expect Nintendo to give you something for free.
Well, apparently not.
I mean, look how much they charge for the dock.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
But like I'm very curious if any of the stuff I own virtual console wise is ever going to matter on the Switch.
I highly doubt it.
Probably. We'll find out in September.
If there ever will be a virtual console.
That's also a good question.
I mean, I'm starting to wonder at this point.
The Nintendo Direct for E3 might be one of the most interesting bits because are we going to find out anything about this stuff? Or is it going to be another like little parade of indie games that we don't really care about or we've already played? And we're waiting for the online service information, and it's just going to be like, it's coming in September, it will be another Direct in August that tells you more. It's like, well...
Well, the big deals are going to be Smash Brothers, Pokemon. It's going to be the games. If they mention, like, or show the online, I'd be really shocked if they show that.
Well, they'd have to show the online if you show Smash Brothers.
And hopefully Pokemon.
And Pokemon, sure.
I hope.
But these seem like games that would require the online infrastructure to be in place, and you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think that will be...
That's your gateway into talking about that.
Well, I think the games will come first, and then the Nintendo Online will be just a sidebar to each game.
Right.
They'll talk about how it works with each specific game.
But some information, please. It's a year and a half after the system launches.
At least we're still playing online for free, Matt.
For now.
For now, not for long. NFL. So yeah, I'm excited for E3. I'm like you, like I'm a software person. I'm not really a hardware guy. After playing God of War for the last few days, I don't know that we need new consoles yet. I just don't. There's still a lot of juice left in these machines, and I would rather sit in this sweet spot for software where all the developers have got their heads wrapped around the hardware and can squeeze the most out of it. The middleware is up to speed and beyond, and it's easy to make games for these. And then the creativity comes out. They're not worrying so much about the nuts and bolts of making a game. They're like, how do we make this game fun? How do we make this game unique? How do we make this game innovative? And I think this is a period you get into where you get the best software. And so I'm totally fine sitting here for the next 2 years. I got no problem with it.
Or more. I mean, at least let me have another Sony Santa Monica game on this system.
I highly doubt that'll happen, but I
think
agree.
Here's the thing. I think it will. I think it will, and at best, or at worst, whichever way you want to phrase it, you'll be able to play it on the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. It'll just look a lot better on the 5.
Probably.
Like, that's the future, I think, is don't force me to upgrade. Let me play it, but entice me with those better graphics and be like, oh, you could play it. It'd be a lot better if you played it on this new hardware.
I honestly don't know if they would ever sell the new hardware, though, Matt. I don't know if they would sell the new hardware. I don't know if people would buy the new hardware. I don't know.
Of course they would.
I think we're seeing it, though, with the X. It's like...
X is selling fine.
fine.
It's not blowing the doors off, but it's apparently selling up to their expectations.
Well...
It's a boutiques thing. It's like that's the thing. Is like you can't expect these like the higher price system to blow the doors off everything if this is the model you're going with. You have to temper those expectations. Like you can't expect that to be the best seller. It's never going to be because it's too expensive.
But ultimately they need something to be the best seller.
Well, it's all one thing. It's all the PlayStation brand. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You can't. You're stuck in that model of generation to generation. You have to let that go.
I don't think the consumer will let it go, though.
I don't think the consumer cares. The mainstream consumer that makes these things successful, not us. They don't know what generations are. They don't know what number generation they're on. All they know is the number is one higher.
But you got to realize, Matt, eventually there are going to be games that are released that are not going to be able to run on the base PS4.
But you don't do that immediately. You give that years. That's years later.
Well, it's already been years. It's been 4 years. And then if you tack on another 2, to me the 6-year mark seems like...
6-year mark is the midpoint.
Oh, jeez.
That
would be bad.
When did they stop making PlayStation 3? It's like last year?
Yeah, but they stopped making games for PlayStation 3 way before that.
Only because the architecture wouldn't support it. PC gaming is scalable to the point that you look at all those things where, it doesn't look good, but look at like stuff where like people put up those videos of Far Cry with the settings like massacred into like a 386 or something.
Like an Art Deco game.
It's like a Rorschach painting.
Right.
But like the scalability of as long as you're keeping the architecture similar, the scalability makes it feasible. And like that's the all you need to worry about is does it run? And it's like, it doesn't run very well or it doesn't look very good. Well, you should get that new system.
Yeah.
Get that new system and it'll look really good. So that's how you sell. And you can talk about like people won't buy the expensive new thing if it just does the same thing they already like talk to Apple's iPhone division about that.
You're right. The other thing too is that the platform holders don't generally, Nintendo does, but the other two don't generally make that much money selling hardware. Mm-hmm. So they're not incentivized to release new hardware because that's not where their profit driven. Their profits come from the software. But obviously there's an argument to be made, well, if you don't have software that looks bigger and better than the stuff that came before, then no one's going to buy the software either, and you need the hardware to facilitate that, blah,
I think going forward, like the subsequent releases of hardware are going to be a much more low-key thing than we're used to. Like, it's not going to be this big
And I don't think we're going to get it at E3 either, by the way. I don't think we're going to see a new Xbox or a new PlayStation at E3.
No. The first next big new system has to be Sony. Because Xbox already just put out their big upgrade.
Yeah.
And just from what I play, assuming they ever put some games on it, they don't have any reason to put out new hardware because it's a very powerful box. You can tell when you play, games that I played on PlayStation 4, even on Pro, and then I play the same game on
it's like night and day.
It's noticeable. It's real.
Yeah.
Even just the fact that like the HDR patch and everything on Witcher 3, like on PlayStation 4 Pro, it still looks good. The HDR is pretty much the same thing, but the draw distance is massacred now, and the 4K isn't quite crisp on the level that you expect it to be, and it runs at 30 frames a second.
Yep.
Like it's a totally different experience.
Yep.
And I don't think Sony has to make the first hardware move. And if you look at God of War and probably Spider-Man coming up, like I can't imagine Sony sitting there thinking like we need new hardware because. Yeah. God of War just burned up the review charts to the point that Cory Barlog did a video where he cried reading the Metacritic. The system is still paying amazing dividends in terms of like the work people are doing on it. You don't need it. And Sony's first party stuff has always been ahead of the curve, the same way Nintendo's first party stuff has always been ahead of the curve.
Yep.
For whatever reason that is, some kind of whatever internal magic these hardware manufacturers have. Like you're not seeing the same, you're not seeing the same magic come out of the third-party stuff necessarily, but like internally they're still making stuff work with this hardware.
Making strides too.
And I think God of War still looks good on the vanilla PS4 too. You're not getting the performance mode, but it still looks really good. It still plays fine.
Yeah.
Like there's no need for new hardware. Show some games. Show some brand new games that really push this stuff. Microsoft.
I can just see a lot of people after E3 2018's over being really disappointed.
if you're expecting new systems at this E3, you're out of your mind.
Yeah,
Like,
but I
it's
think a
not
lot of people
happening.
are.
I don't see why. The only
Well,
one
because there was a big rumor going around just 2 weeks ago that the PlayStation 5 was coming out this year. People want it so bad that they were willing to believe that completely irrational rumor.
I don't think very many people want that.
Want what?
To spend $500 on a system nobody needs.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason for it.
But a lot of people don't understand games like we do or like sifters do. We were kind of on an other level of understanding from the average consumer.
Yeah, but these aren't average consumers. Average consumers don't even know the PlayStation 5 was talked about yet. The average consumer doesn't know the PlayStation 5 exists until they run an ad for it.
Yeah.
Like it's like the.
Well, they'll know when it's announced at E3 because it'll
No,
be
they
all
won't.
over Yahoo and USA Today.
No, they
and
won't know.
CNN and
That's not how that works. Like, that's still just enthusiast stuff. Like, I still have people asking me what this God of War game is today. Like, what's this? What's God of War? I thought that game was on PlayStation 2. It's like, yes, God of War was on, but they don't know. And these are not stupid people. They're not like ignorant people. They just don't follow video games. They don't pay attention to this stuff. And it's the same thing with movies. People who follow movies are like, oh my God, how can like this trailer and that trailer? Like, the people who make these movies big hits on opening day don't know about this stuff. I always tell the story about in 2015 when Force Awakens was coming out. Star Wars is coming back. Oh my God, Star Wars. And I would go to my friend Lawrence's house and we would watch football every Sunday that fall, from August on going up to December when that was. And he had a bunch of people who would come over watch football all the time. A bunch of us, like him and me, Chris Gore, like a bunch of people, like we would just basically talk movies a lot.
Right.
And football's on, but we're talking about movies and
Right.
Star Wars and stuff. We're talking about every single element. We're dissecting it. And like, there's other people there, and they're in the room while we're talking. Or sometimes they talk. It's just a movie talk thing. And the week before Thanksgiving, they started running ads for The Force Awakens during the football games. And at one point, Force Awakens ad came up, and one of the women that had been coming to almost every Sunday for 3 months says, "Oh my God, they're making a new Star Wars movie." And we're like, "What if?"
she must be a big time football
What have we been
fan.
talking? No, she just wasn't listening to our asses because
Right,
we're just nerding out over on the couch.
Right.
But we're like, we've been talking about this movie for 3 months, like while you've been here. And she's like, "Oh, I don't listen to you."
I watch football.
But that's how a normal person finds
you're
out
right.
about this stuff
Yeah.
is they see it on a major sporting event or something like that or a talk show. And that's how they find out. That's actually, my mom was the first person to ask me about that Facebook Watch thing. You remember that
geez,
video
yeah.
thing? She's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "How do you know about that?" She's like, "Oh, they talked about it on The View."
Yeah.
That's how people find out about this stuff, not E3.
But E3 is the one opportunity for games to end up on shows like that. If something big breaks at E3, they might end up making it on the talk show circuit, or it might be on the nightly
Not if they have
news,
nothing to
or-
bring. I mean, sometimes Reggie shows up on stuff like that for like Nintendo will embrace that.
Right,
idea.
like if Nintendo Labo had been announced at E3, it probably would have ended up on at least a few of those shows.
If they were willing to bring it to one of those
Right.
shows, sure.
Which they would
But
be.
what
That's
usually
Nintendo.
happens is something like that happens, and sometimes it's even the same people that ask me around the time the thing comes out that said like, "Oh, I saw that on the news," and then 6 months later they've completely forgotten about it, and they're like, "Oh, there's a thing. This thing's coming out." It's like they don't retain that information because they don't care to the degree that we care. So
Yeah.
like, I don't think it really buys you a whole lot of mind share beyond that initial week of E3. And the only thing that's going to make a PlayStation 5 announcement significant or a PlayStation 5 release significant is the fact that the number 5 is at the end of it.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like that's it. Because trying to explain to someone who doesn't really follow games or really care about games, just likes to play games, what the PlayStation 4 Pro was an exercise
forget it.
in
Yeah, forget
just
it.
no.
It's not happening.
You get into the whole it's like HDR.
4K checkerboard again.
I'm not explaining what HDR is to you. It makes it prettier. Trust me. But it doesn't make it prettier for you because you don't have a TV that does it. So
Right.
just forget it.
Yeah, just act like it never existed.
Don't buy it. Don't buy it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Just stop.
All right, we should move on. We're going to talk next about the next BioShock game, which was just broken very nonchalantly by our favorite games journalist, I might add, Jason Schreier, once again. As we said, he's like one of the only real journalists in the industry. He went...
Because he doesn't sleep.
I guess apparently not.
Little known fact.
He went to do a feature on what went wrong with Mafia 3. He goes to visit. This may have killed the studio, by the way. Mafia 3. It did really poorly compared to what it was supposed to have done, and after how long it was in development. He writes his
Still
feature.
doesn't run a steady frame rate on my PC.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty much a disaster. And he goes to talk to the studio about, hey, what happened with this game? And he writes it up in very nonchalantly in like the third paragraph of the feature. He writes, he compares that studio to the studio right next door that is making the new BioShock. It's like, there's your story. Like, it's not about this developer who bombed making Mafia 3.
Except that got a lot of people to read that Mafia 3.
It absolutely
click
did.
on that Mafia 3 story, didn't
I mean, most people didn't read it past the third paragraph,
but they still got that click.
They sure did. And so he just nonchalantly, brand new studio next door, working on a new BioShock game. Rumors have been swirling for a while. There were job listings. Again, job listings are like the number one thing that breaks like game news anymore.
What? Infinite was what, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Early 2013?
Yeah, that sounds right. So, I mean, it's obviously due. We're due for a new BioShock, but now this is the first official confirmation that it's coming, because if he had written that and it weren't true, like we were saying earlier, he would have had to retract his comment. The publishers would have come to him and be like, I don't know where you heard that. That's not true. That has not happened. That information is still live on Kotaku. So, absolutely, a new studio is working on a new BioShock. Now the question becomes, Matt, what do you want from the new BioShock?
Nothing.
Nothing?
If Ken Levine's not making it, I don't really care.
Really?
No. Ken Levine is, and the Irrational guys are that series to me. I did not like BioShock 2 outside of Minerva's Den, the DLC they did.
Yeah.
I found it extraneous, and I think only Levine and his team really understood what BioShock was or should be, even with the shortcomings I found of Infinite. And I'm not particularly interested in someone else picking that baton up. Unless I got to see it and see what it is, but like this series seems so propaganda. This series seems so rooted in the people who made it that I don't really know if I am on board for handing it over to other people.
Well, here's what I'll say. So I booted this up to grab some footage very quickly, and immediately realized how much better this game is than both of the games that came after it.
I would agree with that.
And Infinite included, which was made by that team.
Yeah. Infinite, I think, had a lot of development hell issues. Like, I think a lot of Infinite ended up on the cutting room floor.
I really liked Infinite, but
I really liked the first third of Infinite.
What they told us the game was going to be and what it ultimately ended up being were two entirely different things. I still enjoyed it. It was more of a traditional first-person shooter than the first BioShock was.
I think this DLC, the kind of the noir thing that took place in Rapture, helped kind of complete the picture of Infinite more. But I felt like there was a lot more ambition to Infinite originally. That they were going to reinvent things, and like there were some real hard stories that were kind of hinted at in the first, that big opening sequence where they bring in the racism idea, and they bring and then all that stuff is basically just dropped.
Disappears.
It just vanishes. And the relationship between Booker and Elizabeth just sort of like happens. There's no time for it to breathe. Like it feels like the whole middle of that game story was just removed to ship it. Because it had been delayed over and over and over. It felt like at some point it was just like a triage job.
Absolutely.
Get it done, get it out there. We're done.
And again, I liked the game.
I liked it. I didn't love it, but I did love BioShock 1.
Absolutely.
I still love
like, again, 1. I booted it up again to capture some footage really quick, and I didn't want to stop playing.
Yeah.
The one thing I feel like, and I don't really even want to talk about BioShock 2, because it's not worth talking about, I think, in the framework of this discussion.
Minerva's Den is good.
Yeah.
But overall, BioShock 2 should probably not have been made.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Infinite, to me, Infinite lost the edge that the first BioShock had. The first BioShock was borderline horror game in a lot of ways. That vibe was completely absent in Infinite. Infinite was more of like a tongue-in-cheek, like cheeky, I guess is a good way to describe it, experience.
It was about a very different idea. I'm
the tone of the two games, they're just entirely different to me.
Yeah. Even though they kind of connect up at the back if you play through and include the Buried at Sea DLC.
Right.
I think it fits together better once.
I mean,
once
the universes are consistent.
Right.
Like I felt like I was playing a BioShock game when I played Infinite, but just the tone and the overall feeling I had as the player while I played Infinite was completely different from the first BioShock.
And I think that's good. I think that's, if you can make two games that clearly take place in the same universe, but aren't beholden to the same tone, that's great. I just think BioShock 1, like, it follows through on everything it sets up, everything it starts out with pays off at some point. It accomplishes, I think, every single thing it wants to accomplish, and I feel like Infinite doesn't, for the most part. And that's where I find, like, and it got to the point where, like, the last third of Infinite has about 5 too many gun battles.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it just turns into a shooter at the end.
Yeah, and there's no, like, one of the great things about BioShock is, like, and I know that Infinite has, like, the wind-up, clockwork president and founding fathers as kind of like a nod to the Big Daddy thing. But one of the things that made the Big Daddy really interesting was that they generally were not aggressive towards you. You had to kind of start the fight, and planning how you were going to kind of how to hope that fight unfolded and use your traps and do all that. That was half the fun of, like, setting up those Big Daddy fights. And in Infinite, the Clockwork Patriot guys, they just stand there and shoot. Like, there's nothing like that. It's just like, okay, just shoot. They're just bullet sponges. There's no strategy to it. There's no tension to it. It's just more guys to kill.
I looked at the first BioShock as an action adventure. I looked at BioShock Infinite as a shooter.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think BioShock Infinite's shooting is very good.
It's not. No, it's serviceable.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's also true of BioShock 1, but it doesn't lean on it.
It's not as demanding. It doesn't demand as much from the player.
Also, like
there's not a whole lot of circle strafing going on in the first BioShock.
They're not. I forgot the name of the damn powers.
Oh, the elixirs?
Yeah, no, your abilities, your whatever you call them.
Oh.
Yeah. Those exist in BioShock 1 to basically slow down or hinder the enemies to the point that you can shoot them.
Right.
Like, it works in concert.
Yeah.
And Infinite, I feel like you don't even need the abilities.
I just shot my way through that whole game.
Yeah.
The whole way through. So I'm actually not that averse to a new studio working on BioShock. I don't know that the people had a lot to do with what tied the first and Infinite together for me. I think it was more about the art style, the music that was in the game, kind of the era that it was set in, even though it wasn't really that era.
But all that comes from the Levine and the Irrational team. Like, they nailed the setting and that tone and that all that in a way that BioShock 2 just couldn't. And BioShock 2 was even set in the same place as BioShock 1, and it just didn't work. Like, the magic was in that Irrational team to me, and, like, until someone, I guess this new one could come out and prove me completely wrong. Maybe they have some Irrational people on, because, like, obviously that team kind of dissolved.
Yeah.
And I think Levine took, like, a
couple of them
and formed, like, a smaller team, and they're doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Like 15 people or something, I think it was. But, like, so maybe a lot of the people that didn't go to that team are working on that. I don't know what the plan is here, but, like, my skepticism is, like, top of the level, like 10 out of 10 skepticism on this game right now.
I'm nowhere near there. Like, I'm probably like a 3 or a 4. I think the publisher helps satiate my concerns a little bit, because other than Mafia 3, it generally has a really good track record with not putting out games until they're good and they're finished. So I think maybe I'm lending a little bit of credence to that its publisher generally puts out really good games that are polished and unique and different. And again, I think that the aesthetic of BioShock is pretty easy to replicate. The soul of a game is never easy to replicate, and I would agree with you that is sort of something special with this franchise, thanks to Irrational. But I think the physical aesthetic, the outward aesthetic of the series is not that challenging to replicate.
I don't think so, but I just, like, looking like BioShock isn't the same as feeling like BioShock, and you got to one of the most.
But you could argue even Irrational really only got it right one time.
Yeah, but part of the reason
I still enjoyed Infinite,
but
despite the fact that it wasn't.
Part of the reason Infinite didn't work is because they were too ambitious in trying to reinvent the game. And that's better than BioShock 2, which was just, we're just going to make the same game again without the soul. And if I had to guess what a further BioShock would be, it would be probably end up more like BioShock 2, which is competent, but not on par with kind of it doesn't have that certain something that Infinite and especially 1 have. And I mean, to some degree, I would have been fine with 1 existing on its own forever. Like I don't think you need more BioShocks after that. After 1. And even
but
then,
that was never going to happen.
Yeah, but
when
like
you have a hit like that, it's.
But the most important thing with a BioShock game isn't even the setting and the tone. The most important thing is to have a story to tell. The most important thing is to have something that everything else plugs into, and they have that in 1 very strongly in the kind of the objectivist Ayn Rand sort of collective community that goes horribly wrong as it inevitably must. Last boss was a little on the nose, but there you go. But like, and then Infinite, you can see that. I don't think they quite pull it off as well. But you can see that like the idea of taking this floating city named after the goddess that we associate with the embodiment of America and kind of exploring sort of the hypocrisy of that image versus how the reality was. And I mean, that's all there. That isn't there in BioShock 2. BioShock 2 is just trying to tell another story set in Rapture.
Same place, yeah.
So if they're going to do this, like you basically got to come up. I mean, I don't know. You need like a space station that's entirely devoted to Stalinism or something. I don't know. Like you need a weird location.
But that's what BioShock is to me. Is creating this fantasy world that is really, really interesting to visit.
Right, but you need like a fanciful, weird location that works hand in hand with a system of government or ideology that you intend to explore or satirize or take down, or all 3. And it can't just be like, oh, hey, look, everything's Art Deco. That's not BioShock. BioShock is associated with that because BioShock 1 did that so well. But you don't need that to be, like, you don't have to be beholden to that artwork, that architecture to make a BioShock game. I just hope that whoever's making this
it's kind of like the Assassin's Creed template.
Yeah. You can make an Assassin's Creed anywhere.
Yeah.
As apparently,
and a BioShock you could
apparently as long as you put really boring modern day sequences in it. But like BioShock is not about like everything needs to look like Rapture. BioShock is about you need an idea and you need a setting and you need a point of view. And hopefully whoever's making this game understands that.
And I think
because Ken Levine understands
I think it needs to make the player feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That to me is an important element of BioShock. Like they put you in moral quandaries that make you question yourself, question the game. The whole dichotomy with the sisters and the big daddies, the just going into the world of Infinite, where it is almost like a rewind back to like 1950s America, where you have these factions of people who feel emboldened to express views that in current day would be frowned upon. It just
and yet,
right? And both games just made me feel unsettled, I guess is the best way to put it. And I love games like that.
Well, at its best, BioShock is about identity, and it's obviously in both 1 and Infinite, you don't know who you are as the player.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't, and a big revelation and a big turning point of both games is realizing who the player character is.
No, you're right.
And
yep.
And kind of the friction that you create.
And that's probably part of what unsettles me when I play the games. I'm like, who am I?
It should.
What am I supposed to be?
That can also become a really irritating thing in a lesser game. That can be an annoying thing.
Yeah. It can be a cheap
and it can
plot
be done.
device,
Like I wouldn't put it on the level of the BioShocks, but Singularity, if you remember that game, which was set in a like a Russian research station. Which it almost kind of is the Stalinist sort of like equivalent of BioShock. It's a similar kind of action adventure as BioShock 1, involves some time travel and some weird government shenanigans. That I thought captured the same idea a little bit as well, because it turns out you're somebody else you didn't realize you were in that as well. Like there needs to be that, and you needs to be the idea of identity, and it also needs to be that identity rubbing up against the identities of all these other characters who are in general unhinged.
Yeah.
Especially in 1, not so much in Infinite. So although they kind of hinted that in places, and you also need giant clockwork monsters of some kind. I mean, like the Songbird or the Big Daddies.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't think quite gets there in Infinite, but
I'd agree.
But the elements are all in place in Infinite. It just doesn't quite gel.
Well, I'll say this much: I've enjoyed 2 of the 3 games in this series so much that I'm going to be willing to give this third one a chance.
I hope it's good.
No matter who's making it or even what the initial impressions are. I would just like to see what another studio would do when trying to create this franchise. Because it's really one of the unique properties in gaming.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I feel like this is either going to be, oh my god, these guys managed to nail it. Whoever was in charge of this team gets it, understood it, like, figured out a way to continue it, figured out a new idea that made it feels like BioShock but isn't a retread. They nailed it. Or it's just going to be another game set in Rapture, and it's just going to be a paint by numbers BioShock jigsaw puzzle.
I think no matter what, it's going to be a tough sell. Even if it's great, I think some people are just going to hate it just because it's not the original team that made it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to hate it because it's not the original team, but I'm going to side-eye it for
I think a lot of people will do that.
Entire development cycle.
Absolutely, yeah. So you think we'll get a look at this at E3?
Maybe. I mean, what else are they showing? But
2K doesn't have to show anything.
That's true.
They have Red Dead coming out, and presumably Grand Theft Auto 6 pretty soon.
Not this generation.
Oh, they've got to put it out this gen. That means
years.
they would put out no GTA this entire generation.
I think GTA 6 is 4 years away minimum.
Oh, that's crazy. It can't be. I think it'll be out in the next year and a half, 2 years.
No way in hell.
We'll see.
Rockstar North has been making Red Dead Redemption.
Kinda.
Yeah, they're the ones who made it.
Yeah, they're putting their name on it, but I don't.
Who made it then?
Well, they still have some people left from that team that worked on the first game.
They fired all those people.
Well, they dissolved the studio. That doesn't mean that they didn't absorb a lot of the people who are working on the game.
I don't think a lot of people from San Diego moved to Scotland
to work on a Rockstar game.
Most of those people, the lead people for the San Diego one, didn't work there anymore after they shipped.
Well, the lead people are going to lose their jobs because the people who work at Rockstar North, there's no way. They're going to take the help.
But if you're going to be working on two projects simultaneously, you need lead people for both of them, which means that if they didn't take those people, they're either Rockstar North has grown exponentially,
which it very well could have.
Could have, but I don't. There were more of those leaks recently where they're like, yeah, we got some pre-production ideas for GTA 6. Like I didn't
see that.
I think that game is 4 years out, 4 years out.
If that's the case, screw Grand Theft Auto Online. Screw you. Because you're keeping me from playing a new GTA. And
you're probably not wrong.
Yeah. All right, let's move along. We're going to talk next about one of my favorite racing games ever. Ever. Wave Race 64, probably my top 5 racing games of all time. Actually, probably my top 3. Part of it might be that I was really freaking good at it. Like, literally, I don't know if I've met anybody who back in 97 that came out?
That sounds right.
97?
Yeah. I think it was 96, wasn't it?
I don't know if it made it out the first year.
I thought that was launch.
It came out immediately after launch in Japan, but I think there was a little bit of a delay. I can't remember. But anyway, back then, I'd never found anybody who could compete with me at Wave Race. In fact, it was just boring. Like, after a while, I got so good at it that it wasn't even fun playing multiplayer. So I have a big-time soft spot in my heart for Wave Race. So this week, it came out that the producer of the original Wave Race 64 essentially said, hey, a Switch Wave Race is coming. Now, what we're seeing right now, this is Wave Race Blue Storm, which was a GameCube game, which was developed by NST. It was not developed in-house by Nintendo. Now, I would say, we were talking just a minute ago about new studios taking on old IPs. I would say that NST did a pretty good job on this because the most important part of Wave Race to me was the wave physics and the way the jet skis reacted to the waves.
That is just a car racing game.
I would actually say that the controls in both Wave Race games are probably the best controls in a racing game ever, as far as realism is concerned. I've never played a racing game that felt more like you're racing actually what you're racing. And I think that presented a lot of problems for people when they played Wave Race because they tried to play it like a typical racing driving game, and they think when they come to a turn, they have to crank the stick over to the side, and that's not how you play this game at all. It is literally a game of very, very fine adjustments as your jet ski reacts to the waves. What I really loved about it was after you would go through a really rough patch with waves and you would get on a really smooth portion of the water, like the feeling that you got was like relief. Because you're like, oh, I don't have to like watch each wave and like make these minute adjustments with every little jostle of the jet ski. I've just never played a racing game that generated the feelings that Wave Race did for me. And now apparently we're getting one for Switch. And so I'm curious, Matt, Did you play the original Wave Race or Blue Storm all that much?
Yeah, I played both of them.
How do you feel about those games?
I don't care about them. Blue Storm has a special place for me in the sense that it was the first game that someone showed me the difference between component progressive scan and composite. Yeah. Where like he you remember Andrew?
Yeah. Of course.
So it was him. He had both. He had the N64 or he had the GameCube. He had two GameCubes. So he hooked up a GameCube through composite and he hooked up a GameCube through component with Wave Race in them and switched between them. And it was like he switches to the component and suddenly you can see I can read all the stickers on the jet ski.
Yeah.
And that was when I was sold on okay, resolution is a very important thing. But in terms of like actually playing it, like I never got too into it. Like it was it's fun. Like it's impressive. I like how it looks.
What did you not like about it? I'm curious.
I'm not a huge racing person. I don't care who's first so much. If there's no kind of progression to it, like if it's just like do a race, now do another race, now do another race, now do another race. Like that doesn't hook me. The reason
I absolutely agree with that about this franchise.
The reason I get hooked on something like Forza is because there's a progression system to I have my cars in my garage, I need to afford this other car to get into this race, I need to do this. Yeah. That's what keeps me playing, whereas like just playing a race over and a race and a race and a race, like nothing about that interests me.
No, I agree with you 1,000,000% about this franchise in general, is that for both releases, there was never anywhere near enough meat on the bone.
Mm-hmm. They were really bare bones to me, and while they are really impressive in terms of how the physics work and how they feel like the real thing, and they feel authentic. They feel you believe you're on water when you're playing it. And the other thing about this series is it blows my mind that there hasn't been one since the GameCube. Like it feels like this would have been a really obvious Wii game.
But maybe that's why, Matt, is because the driving genre has kind of left this type of design behind. Like you can't really just make a game anymore that has a Grand Prix where you race through 8 different tracks a couple different times.
But there's no reason you can't adapt this to like a more career-driven mode. Like you could.
No, you absolutely can. I just think Nintendo has no interest in doing that whatsoever. I mean, if it won't do it with Mario Kart, why would it do it with Wave Race?
Yeah. Well, maybe because Wave Race is going to require a little more meat on the bone than just hey, it's Mario. Like it doesn't have the cachet of Mario Kart. I'd be interested to see what they do with this. I certainly like to see what a modern Wave Race looks like. I'm not saying this looks bad, but it sure looks old now. Like outside of the water physics.
Well, it's low poly. Yeah, everything, the track, the track size, and
like really, this isn't even too good looking by GameCube standards now. They're much better looking GameCube games. That's cool. I mean, look, they need all the freaking. I mean, I would prefer an F-Zero game, but
see, I would not. I would absolutely prefer a new Wave Race over F-Zero because of how it feels. Like I remember finishing races of this game and you'd just be like mentally exhausted because you can't. It's not like a normal driving game where you're like, the road's always flat, and I know how these tires are going to react, and I know when I need to hit my brake, and I know how apex turns work, and I know where to go in, I know where to exit the turn. This game is just every race was different and unpredictable. Like you could just be going, you could be in the lead, and all of a sudden some weird rogue wave comes along, and you aren't prepared for it, and it knocks you completely off course, and someone else is good just passes you. Like I felt like this racing game was the true test of someone's skill.
See, I think that's why I don't like it because to me racing should be about the perfection of those skills and not about the random number god throwing a bad wave at you.
But that's the way water is.
Yeah, well, that's why I wouldn't race on water because it's annoying.
But that's not what it was. If you were good enough and you had the ability to adjust to that wave that's hitting you, absolutely.
Not if it hit you in the wrong place.
No, definitely not. Absolutely.
Well,
I've played this game for hundreds of hours, and we would get to the point where we would turn everything off. It was the purest racing that there was.
Okay, but if you're going to say that, you never get to question me again when I tell you that everything in Bloodborne and Dark Souls is skill-driven.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no random stuff.
You're
in
comparing an
Dark
action RPG with a jet ski racing
Yeah,
game.
but I'm saying the whole reason...
There's no more apples to oranges comparison than that.
It's completely apples to apples because it's skill-driven. Like, you have to get good at it. And what I'm kind of saying about Wave Race...
What I say about
the
Souls games is that they're unfair and they don't respect the player's time.
And you're wrong.
No.
But you're not good
if you put a checkpoint like 80 miles apart, it has nothing to do with how good you are. It's just annoying that you have to be able to play through that 80 whatever section.
Well, if I'm in the lead and I get hit with a rogue wave and I don't do the exact right thing and I get stuck in third place because of that right before the finish line, that is also annoying. And the difference is, I never had felt any kind of incentive to get good enough at Wave Race to counteract stuff like that. You don't feel any incentive to get good enough at Dark Souls to counteract that situation. It's that kind of thing. It's like either you get absorbed in the skill-driven idea of becoming good enough to counteract these random things that get thrown at you, or you don't. And for whatever reason, probably because there just wasn't any progression to it, Wave Race never hooked me in that way. And like
the racing was good enough for me, is what it was. The feeling, the realism, that was all I needed. And I was lucky. I did have like a group of friends who got into it just as much as I did. And so we just pushed each other to keep getting better at the game. And I mean, we just had serious throwdowns in this game, man. Like people would come over and like try to race us, and we'd literally like lap them in a 3-lap race. That's how good we got at it.
I think that was part of the problem. Was like in my group of friends, no one cared enough to get good enough at this to make it an interesting competition.
I didn't play Blue Storm like that, by the way. I played the Wave Race 64 like that.
I think I played more Blue Storm. I don't have a lot of memories of the N64 one. I think I played it because it was so early in the system's life there was nothing else to play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's why I bought it initially. Right. I was like, why would I ever want a jet ski racing
I think
game?
for me, the game equivalent of that was Killer Instinct Gold. It was like, I got nothing else to play, so I'm just going to play this obsessively.
Did not enjoy it hardly at all.
I went back to that recently, and I'm just like, no, this isn't good. Like, it was just because I had nothing else to do.
Those were the N64 days, Matt. I bought a lot of games that today I would definitely never buy.
Oh, I think Killer Instinct and Shadows of the Empire I bought before I had the system.
Yeah,
like that.
I played Shadows of the Empire.
In part because you remember the cartridges were so rare. Like there were shortages. And
that's right.
And like I remember, I didn't expect to get the system until Christmas, but I bought Shadows of the Empire in August.
Yeah.
Because I was like, if I can't find this come Christmas,
I enjoyed Shadows of the Empire.
It's all right.
Go back and play it now.
It's a lot
of early 3D games are like that, though.
I mean, I don't know. The Hoth level still works okay, but anything else on foot is just like, oof.
Yeah. Yep.
The only other notable thing about that game is you got to see what the bottom of a Dianoga looked like.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you think people will care about this though? Because it seems like you don't care.
I don't.
I'm really excited about it, but you don't care about it.
I'm sure as hell not spending $60 for it, unless it's like some kind of super reinvention of the franchise that has like a lot of meat on it.
I wouldn't recommend people buy it at $60 if it's the same design as the first two games. I wouldn't, because racing games have come so far. Back when this came out on the GameCube, racing games were still just kind of like this. It's like, hey, we have 11 tracks. Here's a Grand Prix. We have like 10 riders or drivers or whatever, or cars. Yeah. Go race.
I was like, this is just not very. There's no personality in this, and even F-Zero has characters in it. Even 1080 had characters in it, and some.
Well,
they
try to do that in this one. Like they tried, but I agree they failed. There's not. I can't remember a single rider's name from this, but I can remember the riders' names from 1080.
It would honestly be news to me that they have names.
They do, yeah.
And I don't actually remember many names from 1080, but I at least remember the selection screen where they're playing,
hanging out in the cabin.
You're hanging out in the cabin and they're playing Rocket Body, Rocket Body. Like yeah. That game I played a lot more in terms of just like a realistic feeling racing game.
They were kindred spirits, 1080 snowboarding and Wave Race, because they concentrated mostly on replicating the real feeling of doing what you're doing. And I think that was maybe in the early 3D days was something I was kind of striving to find, were 3D video games that made it as close to virtual reality as possible, where it actually felt like I was doing. And then with the Rumble Pack instituted with all of it, it just made it all the more realistic. And so back then, like realism to me was really important in 3D games. Now, not as much, or not even close, really, to be honest. But
I think, well, part of it was because like the idea of realism was sort of the holy grail of 3D at the time. It was just like, oh, this feels so real. Like that was, we hadn't learned yet that it's like that's not actually automatically fun.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because we'd only been playing 3D games for like 3 months.
And at the time of this, I think my racing game of choice at the time was Need for Speed Hot Pursuit.
Yeah.
The PC version of Porsche Unleashed, that kind of stuff. It was that sort of like that. Oh, it kind of feels real, but it's really just arcade. But it's like got a little kind of like what the balance at Forza Horizon struck later on. It was like Porsche Unleashed and the PC version of Hot Pursuit and Most Wanted were tremendously moddable. You could make them look really good by the standards of the time, and they felt like this game. They felt authentic when you played them. It was but like I always found the wave physics in this to be impressive technically, but too RNG for my taste in terms of just trying to play a game.
There are just some of those special moments in this game, like when you catch a wave, like when you're riding along and a wave builds up behind you, and your jet ski gets on the crest of that wave, and you just stay on the crest of that wave for like 100 yards. Like that stuff just happens like all the time, and I think that's why I enjoyed it. It's like even if you race the same track, it was never the same twice around. Mm-hmm. There was just always a different wave or a different approach you could take. And then there's the tricks which are light, but there was like the whole diving below the water and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I hope they get the Slim Jim sponsorship back.
I haven't seen a Slim Jim commercial in a long friggin' time.
Oh, they still show up.
I guess I'm not watching MTV anymore or whatever.
I don't see Slim Jim so much as the Jack Link's jerky with messing with Sasquatch.
Sasquatch, I do see those. They show those during football a lot. So I end up
really, can you follow up the Slim Jims now that Randy Savage is no longer with us?
No.
You can't.
I didn't even, wait, he's dead? Oh, that's
right.
Years ago. He just died, yeah. Wait, I thought it was just like 2 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, well, that's years ago.
Yeah, that's plural, more than one.
That's a long time ago to someone who's not as old as us.
Yeah, I guess it's true. So, I don't know. I personally am really excited for a new Wave Race.
I think it's a good choice.
I would love to see it on a more powerful console. Like, I'd love to see a Wave Race on Xbox One X or whatever.
Welcome to Nintendo.
But like, it is what it is.
It's been, what, 3 systems since the last one? So one way or the other, it's going to look real good.
I'll take what I can get, though, at this point, because I really didn't think I'd see another
one.
Because Blue Storm did not do well, by the way. Just like 1080 Avalanche did terrible on GameCube as well. So
I would rather see 1080 or F-Zero come back, but really, I'm all for them resurrecting their old franchises that have been neglected for so long. Wave Race is one of the oldest neglected franchises at this point. We haven't seen one of those since early 2000s. So yeah, it's good. And they need to fill some holes in that release schedule, so that's a good choice.
And I think, to me, this game would fill more than a hole. Like, this is one of those games that I would play for months and months and months.
Well, the other thing, of
provided
course,
they nail it.
And the other, I mean, it doesn't apply to me because I don't play the thing handheld, but like, a racing game is a good portable option.
Yeah, I don't know if this one would be, though.
Well, yeah, it'd be pretty hard. I mean, that's the thing is like,
and then maybe that's why they may not make it or
precision
whatever.
Controls while you're holding the screen, it tends to be a little different.
Tough. Absolutely.
But I don't know. People can play Monster Hunter handheld. They can probably play this handheld.
That's a good point. Let's move on. We're going to talk next about Halo 6. Yet another job listing leak comes out.
Did you really just stop hiring people?
They really... I don't know how you get around it. I mean... In this case, they basically said it was Halo, though.
Yeah, at a certain point, it's like, whatever. Like,
well, when you know that a studio only makes one franchise.
Right. Yeah, if 343 is looking for people, you know what they're after.
Yep. So. And in the job listing, they wanted people with experience making games in 4K at 60 frames per second. They specifically had that in the listing. So, Matt, Halo 6, 4K native, 60 frames per second. You think it's possible?
On the X. Probably, yeah.
So that means we're only going to get one Halo for Xbox One, essentially.
Probably. Was 5 not on 1?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I guess 4 was on 1.
4 was 360.
Yeah, so that would mean we get 1 just on the base Xbox One. Because I guess it'll probably scale down for 1.
It'll still work. I mean, I don't know if it'll be 4K 60 frames a second.
Oh, definitely not.
On the S.
There's no way that it'll work on the S at that.
But clearly they're targeting, that's also incentive to buy an X, I guess, if you're really married to the 60 frames per second idea.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see that was their target, 4K 60. There aren't many games that run in 4K at 60 frames per second at all right now. And I was kind of surprised to see that was sort of their baseline requirement for the game.
Mm-hmm. Well, they got to do something, right? Because otherwise, it's like, well, it's Halo again, so you should, focus on the performance, especially if they're gonna.
You just launched the X.
If they're gonna take another shot at kind of the esports thing with this series, like you're gonna need something that runs solid and well. 60 is kind of the minimum standard in that regard. Makes sense to me. Who knows if the campaign will run at 60? That's happened before.
Yeah,
the multiplayer runs faster than the campaign.
That happens a lot. Actually, I mean, it's happened a ton on Call of Duty as well. Do you think that because of these specs that maybe this is a launch game for Xbox 2?
No.
No?
No. The X can run something. If they want to basically just keep it at more or less this level with some HDR, like it would still look really good. The X can run it that fast.
You think so?
Yeah. No question. X is a very powerful system. It just has nothing to run right now. Right? Like, you just wait until Crackdown 3 comes out.
I guess that is kind of the point. Like, Microsoft needs something to sell the X, right?
Yeah.
And maybe this is it. But if they're just now hiring folks, which blows my mind. I mean, obviously, they just finished pre-production, I'm guessing. And now they're actually going into full production.
Yeah, or they're in full production and they're about to hit optimization.
Yeah, that could be too.
Which puts it maybe a year and a half, 2 years out.
And by then, does the X matter? Is Xbox 2 not coming at that point?
Yeah, it's like barely 2 years later.
Yeah.
The Xbox One X isn't even a year old. They're not even thinking. I mean, they are thinking about it. They're always designing the next hardware.
Yeah, they're already working on it.
But the next Xbox is years out. Years out. Sony's got to make their move first. Like, there's no reason to put another Xbox out yet.
Well, there is a reason. Microsoft's doing terrible.
That doesn't mean you put out another $500 box of hardware. It didn't work the first time. It's not going to work this time. Let the competition make the first move and then trump them.
Yeah, I mean, they should have learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, it worked for Sony. Multiple times. Sony has done that many times. That's how they crushed Sega in the old days, and it's how they took the lead this generation too.
Well, it helped when you had your competitor going before you at E3 and showing all their goods first.
Sony knows how that plan works. But yeah, I mean, that Sony conference, the year that both the 1 and the 4 were announced, was just Sony just basically got up on stage and dropped a microphone. Like that was.
Yeah, Microsoft made it easy.
Yeah, Microsoft made it real easy, but like that's kind of the thing is like Microsoft has to learn to observe what the competition is doing and react to it this time, and react to it in a way that makes you look better than the other. I mean, the problem here is, of course, is Sony going to make a mistake on the level of what Microsoft did? Probably not. So, but then they have in the past.
Yeah,
so
I mean, you don't know that for sure because you would have said that before the PlayStation 3 came out.
But
and
then we had $599
absolutely dropped the ball. So, I mean, Ken Kutaragi's not there anymore.
Right. I mean, you got Cerny running the show now, which I think is a much more...
On the tech side.
Yeah, but I mean, what I mean is like you're not going to have something crazy like the cell processor pop up again because Cerny knows what he's doing. He may keep inflicting knack sequels on us, but he does know what he's doing.
I guess my other question is, do you ever see Halo being what it once was ever again?
You mean like kind of the king of the hill in terms? Probably not. I mean, it seems to have struggled to compete with Call of Duty in the heyday of Call of Duty. Now you're in I mean, clearly Halo 6 will have a battle royale mode.
Yeah. But everything will, so it won't be an advantage for anyone.
Yeah, it won't be. It'll just be like, hey, we can play this in Halo now.
Yeah.
It's a I don't know. I think so many Microsoft's eggs are in the Halo basket that they can't. It's going to take a lot of games of Halo for them to admit that this doesn't work anymore.
I think and I don't think the problem.
Not that I'm saying it doesn't work anymore. I'm just saying like, if it just keeps declining. I mean, part of it is like you got to get the story to work again. Like they made 2 games in a row that were basically Act 1s that were never followed up on.
I don't think the problem is the developer change because we've seen what Bungie created afterwards. Is it really that much better than, or is it even better than what the new studio has done with Halo?
Yes.
You think it's better?
I think Destiny feels better because the enemies are not giant bullet sponge idiots.
Yeah. Well, they are. Destiny's enemies are bullet sponges.
Not if you hit them in the head. Like, there's nothing...
I've dumped a lot of lead into Destiny enemies over the years.
Yeah, but you hit them in the head, they pop like that. Like, I mean, unless you're talking about a boss or something, even then they have weak spots. I mean, obviously you've got the kind of the raid boss thing is a different story. But what I'm saying is, Like, I feel like I can take on a whole group of like 6 or 7 enemies in Destiny and pop some heads and get out of it real quick and smooth. Whereas with the recent Halo games, you're fighting these Prometheans, you just soak up damage over and over. You just got to.
They have the shields with like the little
shields.
hole.
And you got to wait for we got to wait for the weak spot to pop.
Yeah.
It's just tedious. It's not fun to play.
Yeah, I don't like the enemies in the new Halo games. But I think the bigger problem with Halo in 2018 is that it's because of what happened with Call of Duty and all these other successful shooters. It's moved away from its identity to try to move to the center. And I think in the course of that, it has completely lost its identity. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't play Halo. It used to be when you played Halo, a new Halo, you could feel it. You knew immediately when you started, this is Halo. You could have swapped out the character models in the game for cubes. And I still would be able to tell you, I'm playing Halo right now. And I feel like it completely lost that feeling over, I don't even know if it was just with the games that are being made by the new studio. I would even argue maybe Bungie's last game, and it kind of started edging that way.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, I think, honestly, if they just went back and made a freaking Halo game, instead of worrying about what the rest of the industry is doing, I think it would have a chance to kind of recapture that magic again.
I think it's possible. Do you think that Halo is is Halo your dad's shooter?
I think to a 17-year-old kid now, absolutely. And I think I have anecdotal evidence to that. Like one of my uncles, he's a huge Halo guy, and he has 3 sons. And his sons, like, they don't play Halo now, but he still gets excited when Halo is coming out. And they're like, they play COD, or they're playing Fortnite now or whatever. But he still likes Halo. Or he likes to play, like, Battlefield 2142 still on his PC. And he did get his kids into that. Like, remember I told you the story about the 4 or 5-year-old kid who could play Battlefield, and he had these little hands that would scurry all over the keyboard. His hands weren't big enough to just keep him in one place, so he had to move his hands while he played. That was what he was playing, Battlefield 2142. And that little kid got good at it, and his older brother got really good at it. But now they've all moved on, and he still loves Halo. So yeah, I would say Halo is like the dad's first-person shooter at this point. It's kind of funny.
And that is a very difficult thing to overcome.
It is, yeah. It absolutely is. But, you have shooters that can come out of nowhere and become a sensation like PUBG or Fortnite. So I feel like there's always hope. But you're right.
Somewhat, I think you are kind of like, it's a double-edged sword with the Halo name. Is like, on one hand, it's one of the most recognizable names in gaming. On the other hand, when you say Halo, everybody just assumes they already know everything they need to know about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that will translate into disinterest if someone has fallen out of favor with Halo for the last couple of games.
There's a lot more competition now,
They got to
too.
win a bunch of people back on this one.
I mean, back when Halo was huge, there weren't that many huge first-person shooters on consoles.
No.
There certainly weren't 10 or 15 other franchises that were on par quality-wise, where how does the shooting feel? Are there no glitches in this game? Is there a big multiplayer suite? Halo used to have that market cornered on consoles, and now it's just one out of dozens. And I think that has been another issue for the franchise.
Well, remember, the last time Halo was really as big as they want you to think Halo was Halo 3.
Yep.
And it's funny.
One of the highest review scores I ever gave a game.
Yeah, it's funny because that same year was Modern Warfare.
Yeah.
That was where it ended. Like,
Yep.
that was the peak because, the next monster rose from the depths at the exact same
And then what you
month.
saw was the franchise trying to keep up with Call of Duty, and you started seeing all these little elements creeping into the game. It lost its purity.
Yeah.
What made it a Halo
I'll
game.
say this: take out aim down sights. Go back to Halo.
I mean, you're right though. That is one of the huge changes that they made that made it like every other shooter.
It feels like everything else.
Yeah, but firing from the hip, that was what Halo was all about. And it completely lost its identity. And I think it just needs to go back and say, what is the core of the Halo experience? Go back to the mantra of make every 15-minute chunk fun. I just feel like it's completely lost what the franchise was built on originally and made it successful. Regardless of how old the player is.
Yeah, but now to me, when you say Halo and you mention a Halo 6, I think about Halo 5 walking into another big room, just being like, here we go again. Here we go again with these stupid Prometheans and It was never fun. It was never fun to fight these guys, and they did 2 games of them.
Halo 4, though, was the worst, dude. That campaign was so bad. I mean, you just walked into a room, killed everything, and then flipped a switch.
Yep.
Walked into the next room, killed everything, and hit a switch. Like,
I mean, 5 was no prize either.
it was better, though.
It was better, but...
particularly the multiplayer was far better.
Yeah, but like it was... like the campaign was still sort of like, okay, you barely play as Master Chief. 3 of the 12 levels are just walking around talking to people.
Yeah.
And none of it ever pays off. Nothing ever happens. It's Act 1. Like, you went through this whole Act 1 of 4 where they're kind of setting up Cortana going rampant. And then Halo 5 is about trying to find Chief who's trying to find Cortana. And then you find him, it looks like she might have gone rampant.
Yeah.
It's this, you're in the same place at the end of 5 as you were at the end of 4. And it's like, tell a story already.
Yeah.
Like what? Like
a lot of the wonder has left.
Yeah, and now you're going to be in a scenario where, Marty O'Donnell's gone. And his music is one of the things that makes Halo Halo.
Absolutely.
And so you either need to find someone who can replicate him properly, or I guess you could hire someone that has the verve to kind of replace him, like a Bear McCreary or something. But in general, I think you're going to lose part of the series identity, and maybe that's a good thing. It might be time to reinvent that a little bit. But I don't know,
it had its own identity though, and it went from being a unique experience to something that just feels like everything else.
It's starting to feel like the series used to be this dynamic super soldier with his power armor and his battle rifle, and it's starting to look more and more like a shambling flood zombie.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. So, you think we'll get a look at this at E3?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's due. It's certainly due.
At the very least, we're getting the traditional CG teaser.
Yeah.
Where you don't realize you're looking at Master Chief until the last 5 seconds. Man is a thing for close.
That would probably be another smart thing in the new Halo. Let us just play as Master Chief.
Yeah, I think they know that.
Is it really that hard?
I think they know that.
There's a reason he's one of the most iconic video game characters ever.
It was a while, months and months ago, but Frank O'Connor and some of the 343 people I did an interview with, yeah, we're really going back to the drawing board, we're really figuring out what people, we realized we stepped wrong in some of these places.
You don't have to go back to the drawing board. It's Master Chief. People love Master Chief. Why? I don't know. I've never really thought he was a great character, but people love him. They recognize him. To go away from him was just
he's kind of
silly.
He's a laconic badass in the way that early mid-2000s heroes tended to be. I mean, I think he's cut from the same cloth as Kratos in some ways.
I guess.
Yeah, Kratos doesn't talk a lot in the original God of Wars. He just sort of yells at Athena, and then he goes roar, and then kills a guy, and that's it.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you did that on purpose.
Of course I did that on purpose.
That was an excellent segue from Matt Kyle. We're ready to go right into God of War. Oh my!
Freak out.
Oh my! What a game, Matt Kyle. Mm-hmm. What a game. A lot of times we get on this show and we talk about games that the critics are giving high scores to and be like, I don't know about that one. I know about this one. Those scores are on the money, man. This game is absolutely incredible. I think what impresses me the most about it is how it is so drastically changed, but somehow still underneath all of the updates and the upgrades and the changes, it still feels like a God of War game. And it's not just because you're playing as Kratos. Mm-hmm. It's the vibe of the game that's
the
still...
vibe, the way...
This is what Halo failed to do.
Right. The vibe and the way they reinvent the mythology into the game world feels very similar to the old God of Wars. It's the way they've, as someone who is pretty familiar with Norse mythology, the work they're putting in on this in terms of translating it to how the game needs it to work is really impressive, and leads to a lot of really good moments. I think anyone who likes Norse mythology is going to be pretty pleased by some of the stuff they put in here and some of the ways they realize some of the things. And you've seen some of these in the E3 demo where the world serpent shows up. I mean, that's a great scene. But the other thing you don't maybe realize is that monstrous snake sort of, you empty the lake by waking him up like that, and he sort of hangs over the lake for the rest of the game. He's just sort of up there. There's this,
he flies around.
There's this serpent kind of looking down at you, and so when you're on a section of the islands near him, you'll hear on the soundtrack him breathing.
Oh yeah.
And it just sort of rumbles the room if you have a subwoofer. It's very impressive.
Dude, the old God of Wars feel just like shells
Yeah, well,
compared to this game in every conceivable way.
I mean, they are what they are.
They just feel completely vapid and
I think it's
disposable.
I think once you play this, it's understandable why they did not release God of War collections alongside this or to build hype for it.
Yeah.
Because it's just not relevant.
It's just completely different. But I think that's what amazes me so much is how different it is from the other games, yet it still feels like a God of War.
Well, I think, like, because I remember there was some concern where, like, oh, if you're going to reinvent this so much, why use Kratos? Like, why make it God of War other than just slap the name on it to get people to buy it? And I think after playing it, and I don't actually know how far in I am. My axe is upgraded to level 4, and there's a maximum of 5, judging by the skill tree. So I'm fairly well in, I think. This would not be the same game if it was not Kratos. Like, Kratos' backstory and what came before in the series is very important and tied into how this game tells its story, why the story is what it is, and why it works so well. And if it was just a new character, it wouldn't work the same way. It needed to be Kratos. They were very smart in finding a way to reinvent this character while remaining true to who he was. Even though he wasn't really much of a character before, he was just a really mad, really angry dude.
He was an avatar for anger.
Yeah, he was.
That's all he was.
He was a raging badass, and that was about it. And now he is a stoic dadass.
That's a great one.
But he's got a lot of like character to him, and it works. Like, it really works. It works. And I came to this game pretty skeptical after all the 10 out of 10s and stuff. But like, yeah,
they're
like,
right
it's
on.
that good. It really is that good.
I honestly think the story and all that stuff is probably the thing that's been changed the least. It's the stuff that you're seeing right here. The under the hood systems that are in the game. I mean, God of War used to have a very simple upgrade system.
Oh yeah, well, it was a standard hack and slash game.
That's all it was.
It was a beat 'em up.
And it's just mind blowing to me how the RPG elements in this. Holy cow! Like, I cannot believe
they're taking a lot of cues from various. I mean, they're taking. In world design, they're taking cues from Metroid and Zelda.
Oh yeah, so you go through, God of War in the past. You go through each level, you never have to come back.
No.
You could if you miss like one little collectible. This game is built like Metroid, where there are certain doors that you cannot get into because you don't have that ability yet. You need to find that ability later on and then come back to these doors to get into them.
Yep. And
look at the trees for everything. Yeah. Like, you can upgrade everything in this game, man. Like, your axe has like 3 parts to it that you can upgrade. You can upgrade the sun. You can upgrade his armor, his bow, his arrows.
And they all do different things, and it all depends how you want to upgrade in order to alter your play style. Like, especially with the kid. The kid can be upgraded so like his armor can let him do different things. Like right now I've got an armor on him that lets him, if my health gets low, he'll find and throw health packs, like health stones at me. Whereas you can also have one where he does more damage when he's like grabbing an enemy, or he'll do more stun when he shoots a guy. There's a lot of freedom to, and like, I have a pommel on my axe now that every time I kill somebody with an axe, I get like 2.5 seconds of health regen.
Dude, the systems are so deep. I almost felt overwhelmed at first with how the trees and everything worked and what I needed to get to upgrade each thing, because some stuff just happens organically too. Like, just out of the blue, all of a sudden the boy would start attacking with his knife. Like, it wasn't anything that I upgraded or anything I did. At a certain point in the game, the son was now able to fight.
Because there's an actual character development moment for that. Like,
right, where he finally gets over his fear of killing.
He finally does stab someone to save his dad, basically, and not that his dad needs saving.
Yeah,
really. I mean, that's one of the things that, after that he can do it, and like there's a lot of attention paid to character continuity in
and
this.
motivations. And why would they do this? Why would they not do this?
There's a section where I don't think you're there yet, but there's a section where the kid gets really mad at Kratos for something that happens, and for the next like 20 minutes, like, instead, because the kid's constantly talking, like you're telling him to do something or do this, or over here he's like commenting on things you're passing by, and for the next 20 minutes the kid was just silent.
Really?
And like, you tell him to do something, he's like, and I knew the kid. I knew from the behavior of the character during normal gameplay that the kid was angry at me, and there was nothing I could do to fix it because Kratos is so socially useless that there was nothing. Because you see, there's that element, that reticence to kind of be a human being to this kid is a constant thread through the game that you see in like that original E3 demo where the kid has to kill the stag, and then Kratos kind of reaches out to put his hand on the kid's shoulder and then pulls back. Like moments like that happen constantly because Kratos is a terrible person.
Yeah, it's that's the most interesting part of the story to me, is the relationship between him and the boy.
Yeah.
Because
and I'm still not sure where they're gonna go with it.
Yeah, like I haven't finished it either. I still have a long way to go. But it's been interesting watching him try to navigate human emotion. Because that's really what it is. He doesn't know how to be a dad. He doesn't really know how to love somebody.
Although he seems to have, because like the motivation...
He's softer, for sure.
Yeah, but the motivation for all of this is that his wife and the kid's mother has died, like right before the game starts.
Is she his wife?
Well, whatever. I mean, I don't know. They were living together and it's their kid.
Right, yeah. But
So-
But that's one thing I've been wondering. Is it his wife?
I mean, as much as anything. I mean, it's not like they could go to a church and get married, sure, but like...
But, Kratos lays down with pretty much anyone.
Yeah, but
so I don't know if it was just one of his hookups or...
It's not at all. It's not.
That's important to the story, right?
Yeah, it's not. This was his life. This was a life he settled down into. But he wasn't really too involved with the kid. The kid is attached to his mother. The kid takes after his mother.
Yeah,
and it's
that's been interesting too, though, watching the kid discover who Kratos really is.
And like there's, and also like Kratos, there's a thread of Kratos discovering that he's not the easiest person in the world to understand.
Yeah.
And he should be more understanding about that. And it's like it's done very, very well and very kind of sort of like organically. It's a real masterclass, I think, in writing two interactive characters over the course of a long quest-style game without ever feeling like you're just sort of running in place.
Also, we should accentuate long. This is a huge game.
It's a good size. It is a 20, 30-hour game.
Yeah, this isn't a God of War 10 to 11 hour.
No, you're not going to jump through this thing. And there's a lot of twists and turns. And there's I mean, if you know Norse mythology, you know there's 9 realms. And you're going to be going to a few of them, I think. And there's the whole element of the Bifrost and like kind of the traveling between worlds. There's a lot more to this game than you might think. It's certainly one of the best. I don't know how far in like percentage-wise I am on this game. I have no idea where they're going with it. Certainly feels like I haven't done a lot of the things that would be naturally expected to be done in this story, but we'll see what happens. But it's one of the best $60 I've spent all year. I'll tell you that much already.
I'll tell you what really blows my mind about this game is all the things that got me to enjoy and buy God of War games in the past. The accessible combat, the over-the-top boss fights with gigantic creatures, the insanely, almost sickly detailed gore. Almost all of those things are gone in this game. There are scenes where you finish off these gigantic monsters, and in prior God of War games, you'd see like the spine come out and like the main artery like flail around. Like they've toned all that stuff down. I have not fought a gigantic boss yet. I fought bosses and mini-bosses, but they weren't like these creatures the size of like a mountain. And like if you had told me before I played this game that was going to be the case, I'd be like, oh, well, what? Well, then I'm probably not going to like it. But nothing could be further from the truth. Like this game has we were talking about souls in video games earlier. This game has a freaking soul. I don't feel like God of War games did before. I feel like they were vapid, highly entertaining, but vapid experiences. And this game just has more of a groove to it. Like you settle in with this game and kind of get more absorbed into the world than you did in prior God of War games. We'll talk about the combat in a minute, but I mean the combat has just been massively overhauled and in so many good ways. The axe, it's so funny. When I heard he had an axe, I'm like, oh, really doesn't register with me. Axe, sword, whatever. Does it really matter? Well, now I see. Like the axe was chosen because you can throw an axe, and that becomes a huge part of the gameplay. Like when I first started playing, I was an idiot using the axe. Like I just didn't even think to use it because I'm not used to throwing melee weapons in games. And so like at first, like if I fought an enemy that I needed to use like projectiles for, I would literally just sit there and let the sun just like chip him down to nothing. And then I'd jump in and finish him off or whatever. like later on, I'm like, what am I doing? I can throw the axe and use it like it's a gun. And once I started doing that, it completely changed the whole game for me.
And I don't think there are a few things in this game that are more satisfying than pulling off, because eventually once you upgrade enough, you can throw the axe in the middle of combos and get it back, and like of course the axe can hit things on the way back to you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything more satisfying in this game when you hack a bunch of guys up, kill a bunch of dudes, throw it over here, kill it, and then you at the end of the fight when everything's done, you hit the triangle button and pull that axe back, and it just goes shunk back into his hand.
Dude. I know it.
It's like the weight and the meat of this game is crazy.
So right, dude. And I love it. I love it too when you're in the middle of a fight with a bunch of enemies and you've tossed your axe out. And while the axe is out, you're using your hand-to-hand stuff in your shield. And then, like, mid-blow, the axe comes in and goes, like, right back into your hand. And you just, it just feels so good.
Yeah, and later on, there's some skills you can get that, like, you no longer have to wait for the catch. The catch becomes another hit in the combo. There's a lot, and like you get like pause combos where you hit and then you stop for a second, and then the rest of the combo becomes a different combo than what if you just kept hammering the button. Like there's a lot, and like you get more distance on things, and like the combat in this is really good. Like you can tell they took some cues from Dark Souls. You can tell they took some cues from the old games as well. But like it's still approachable, and it's still understandable, and you can get through it. Like the kid is a good asset as well. Like through upgrades and sort of
you can be strategic with him.
But
you can use him to distract enemies.
Yeah, you can hack your way through it if you need, but you can get real fancy if you
I don't
want
think
to.
you could just hack your way through this game.
I think you can.
Really?
It's once you upgrade the axe a little bit, like it does some pretty damn good damage.
Maybe eventually, but the early part of this game, you definitely cannot hack your way through it. I mean, the enemies do too much damage. They are too smart for you to just hack your way through it. The combat in this game is so much better. It's not as flashy as the old God of War games. It just feels way more realistic and way more real, way more impactful, way more satisfying, most importantly.
Yeah, I mean, you're not strangling centaurs with their own intestines anymore.
Nope.
There are some gory moments, like when like when you kill ogres, sometimes you rip their jaws open and stuff like that. But like, there's nothing on the level of like in God of War 3 where you rip Helios's head off slowly.
Or where you would like disembowel enemies and like their innards would fall out. Like it's just nowhere near as gratuitous.
Now, part of that is because a lot of Norse mythology things are made of stone.
Yeah.
Like even
a lot of the enemies don't really have blood. They have like lava almost inside them.
They're on fire. Like they're weird ethereal things. Like like really the ogres and the trolls are the only things that have like real blood in them so far. And I know people were like freaking out in early footage where it's like, oh my god, they changed the blood to orange. Well, the blood is orange because the things you're fighting are like lava people, basically. Like it varies what color things are. And there's a lot more puzzle solving in this than any other.
Oh yeah, we should talk about, there's a lot more puzzle solving in this game. I was like shocked. I mean, and that's another thing that the axe is used for a lot. Is puzzles.
Puzzle solving and the bow eventually, like it's very Metroid in that
it really is.
You get various upgrades that then let you do these things, or like it teaches you how to do something different with the axe sometimes. Early on, it's funny because like early on you start running into these certain chests or like areas that you can't get past because there's a thing blocking. You're like, well, how do I get through? I must not have that item yet. And it turns out later you do have. All you need to do is throw the axe. You just didn't know what you had to throw the axe at yet.
Yeah.
And it teaches you that later, and then you come back and there's all this stuff you can access.
There's a learning curve with the axe because when I first started playing it, I just totally forgot to call it back.
Yeah, I kept doing that.
So I would throw it out because I've never played a game before where you throw a weapon out and then you have to call it back to you. And so I would throw the axe, and I'd go into like a melee with a bunch of enemies, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm beating these guys with my fists and my shield, where's my And then I have to hold the triangle, and it would come back to me. It takes a while before you get into the swing of it, but once you do, man, it plays like no other game, which is hard to say in 2018.
And the different ways, obviously the axe is useful as a projectile, but eventually you learn to like, if I hit certain enemies, if I hit them with it, they freeze in place until I pull the axe out of them.
Yep.
And so like that can like buy you some time to hammer on another guy. While they're doing that, you pull the axe back to you in the middle of that combo. The guy who was frozen needs a moment to recover because you just pull the axe out of him and hurt him again.
Yeah.
You can, if you're close enough to a wall, you can pin him to the wall with the axe. Like, and you get extra points for that. Like it's there's a lot to it, and I didn't expect it. I mean, because there is a way that this game sort of feels like the new Tomb Raiders, and sort of that sort of.
Oh, it definitely feels like Kratos Raider.
Yeah,
like
times, that kind of
yeah.
like the character is very large, the camera's near the ground, like
Yeah.
the environments are big, and sort of like you have to sometimes you have to sort of figure out like, okay, where's the cliff I can climb to get out of the area. But like the combat in this is beyond
It really is
any
sublime.
other entry in this sort of subgenre.
And then I mean, we haven't even started talking about.
It was
like,
really the combat I was expecting to be kind of functional and
Right.
passable, and it's not. It's
No,
just
it goes beyond that.
It's on par with like a good fighting game in places.
Yeah, and then there's other things that you get that like just extrapolate on it more. Like you can get abilities to like recover your health. Like there's there's like magic in the game. This game is awesome, people. Don't watch us anymore. Go buy this game right now before your store closes.
Yeah, you really shouldn't. Like, and I, I think was it Greg Miller said like if you intend to buy this game, like just don't watch it. Just go do it and don't watch anything because you don't want to know. And like he's right. Like don't be as surprised as you can by this game. And I'm not a like oh no spoilers person.
Yeah.
Like I'm like cause the other thing is like stuff happens in this game where like you don't know that's what's gonna happen. You can't. I'm very good at predicting story swerves and like I know Norse mythology very well. For instance, like early on in the game, there's a big fight, which is one of the greatest superhero fights in the history of video games.
Agreed.
I don't know any other way to put it. Superhero fight.
It really is.
And I knew who.
It actually reminds me of that old comic I've talked about before called Destroy.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought it is very similar to Destroy. That's that big. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it is. Or like if you like the fight between Iron Man and Thor in the first Avengers.
Yeah, that's a good analogy
like
too.
That. But because I know Norse mythology well enough, I knew who that was.
I still have no idea who he is.
But it's great that like, it doesn't matter if you know who he is. Like it's an interesting setup.
It's just a great
story.
fight.
It's the catalyst that gets the story going, really. But the fact that I knew who that was after that was like, oh, that's really cool. So I'm kind of like my Norse mythology knowledge is sort of battling with like what I know about how this story is kind of playing out to be like, oh, where are they going to go next? What's going to happen now? Like that's a really interesting kind of intellectual game to play with yourself if you know this material already. And even if you don't know this material already, like it's interesting because like the designs are so big and over the top and crazy and like it's just the same, like it was, the Colossus of Rhodes is not a particularly interesting statue except when you have to fight a giant version of it at the beginning of God of War 2. Yeah. And that kind of spectacle is still there. It's just not quite as... I mean, it's almost like this game is like the grown-up father version of the other old games. Like the old games were like kind of the adolescent crazy person, like raging party maniac. And this game is like the stoic Kratos dad. It's like, yes, the lake is very pretty. That is a very impressive giant serpent son. But like... let's just paddle for a while.
Yeah. I cannot recommend this game highly enough. The only person I would not recommend, well, actually, two groups. Kids should not play this game. And people who only like to play multiplayer. And other than that, I recommend this game to everybody. It is all that and 5 bags of chips. I cannot wait to end this show so I can go home and play it some more. This whole weekend, all I'm going to do is play God of War.
And if you have a Pro... a lot of the options are a little buried. They don't kind of call them out to you. If you have a Pro, get into those options and I think it's under display or graphics, I don't remember, or gameplay. It was kind of weird in a weird place. Change it to performance mode because there's different modes. And resolution mode makes it like go high res or whatever, full 4K supposedly, but it's like sub 30 frames a second. If you go to performance mode, it's not a locked 60 frames per second. But it's higher than 30 most of the time. It feels really smooth, and that's definitely helps during the combat a lot. So I would say if you're playing this on a Pro, switch it to performance mode early on because it doesn't seem to tell you that. I had to dig in there and figure it out during one of the early fights.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, this is because you can tell it's dropping. Like it's gorgeous in either mode. It doesn't matter.
It runs like it doesn't run at 60 on the base PS4. I'm playing on the base PS4, but it stays solid.
Yeah,
it doesn't stutter. It never slows down.
Yeah, but the resolution mode on Pro, like you can see it even like in the the opening title screen where he chops the tree down. Like you can see it.
Oh, really?
Dip a little bit,
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this got to change. Like this. I tried it, and I'm just like, no, I need the higher frame rate.
Yeah, I
always
guess
pick the higher frame rate.
I try not to ever compare games to other games, but I think it's very useful for people to give them a frame of reference. And to me, this game is the combat's a lot like the Soul series, but it's not quite as unforgiving. Mm-hmm. The level design is very much like Metroid.
Although early on, your life bar is so short.
Yeah, it is
couple
tough
of
at first.
couple of mistakes in a row and you're in trouble.
You die, yeah. But you get past that pretty quickly.
Right. The checkpointing is
But
very...
the way it feels in the combat feels like Souls. The level design is like Metroid. It's not an open world game. It is kind of a controlled environment, but there are areas where it kind of cracks
there's
open.
big areas, there's places to explore and discover.
And there's reasons to go back to areas that you were already at before. RPG element-wise, to me, is very similar to Tomb Raider in that regard. Maybe even a little more robust than Tomb Raider.
Tomb Raider doesn't have the skill tree flexibility.
I mean, I was shocked at how deep the skill trees went. I never.
I mean, you're dealing with the skill trees for the different weapons and the two different characters and armor and equipment and modifications for both characters and all the different elements. You craft everything.
Resources.
You can upgrade everything.
Yep.
Which is actually one of the funnier, like, kind of character-driven things in this, where, like, the kid behaves a lot like your standard RPG protagonist, where he wants to run around and see everything and figure out why everything is the way it is and help anybody that needs help. And Kratos is like, we are here to find ways to help our journey. Like, we don't care about anyone else. We are, and like, so like.
But the kid does do that. He'll point out things that you missed. Also, the game, like, it's so funny. Like, there's that one mission early in the game where you have to find the 3 seals to open up the coffin, and I could not find the 3rd seal. I went all the way like to the end of the level, came all the way back, and I noticed as I was walking back, the camera tips up and actually shows me where the seal is. Like, just so many little touches like that in this game. It's so polished. It's so good, people. Like, if you have a PlayStation 4, just go buy this. Like, I cannot think of a game in recent memory I have so wholeheartedly would recommend to a purchase to almost anybody. It is that good.
Yeah, I think this is the first game of the year. I said this to one of my other friends on text today, where I said, this is the first game of the year where I'm like, of 2018, where I'm like, if you're willing to hold a controller, play it.
Yep. I am freaking loving it. And
unless, as you said, you only play multiplayer.
Yeah.
Then it's probably not going to do it.
Or if you're a child. Which it's too late.
If you're a child, I don't know what you're watching. Yeah, I don't know what you're still up.
But there you go. Double thumbs up from GameFace. It is as good as the reviews say it is, without a doubt.
And I can't believe it, but
I can't either. I really can't either.
Like,
it's the same studio that made the prior games.
Yeah, and I was sitting. I mean, I'm
it's not
sitting
like it was handed to a new studio.
I mean, I'm sitting there playing this like last night or the day before, and I'm like, okay, well, when we talk about this on the show, we're going to talk about it, because I know Shane's going to want to talk about, like, what would you change? And I'm just like, what would you, and I'm like, I can't think of anything.
I can't either.
Like, everything's fucking great.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It feels good to be this giddy over a game. It seems like it's been a long time since I've played a game like this where I is just...
And it was even able to get to me with my kind of like, because I kind of sat down with this game, I'm like, okay, 10 out of 10 from IGN, God of War. Let's go.
Well,
like,
when you hand out
like, prove
10 tens a year or whatever.
Like, prove it to me. Like, let's see it. And
they got it right this time.
Like, 2 hours in, I'm just like, okay, like,
go get it, people.
They got it.
Go get it. I'm sure we'll be talking about...
And if you don't have a PlayStation, think about it.
Yeah, sell your Xbox and go buy one.
Like, really. Like, between this and Spider-Man, you're going to need one of these this year.
Yeah.
It's like having a Switch last year. Like, two very important games.
More highly than I am. In fact, we'll be talking about this game again. I guarantee it. We'll talk about it next week. And
yeah, I think if you want to be game literate for 2018, you're going to need to play this.
Play it. Yep, absolutely. So there you go. There's our first impressions of God of War. They won't be the last. But I think we did our job in convincing you that you should definitely go and spend $60 on this game.
The hype is real, and I'm disappointed if you're still here.
Yep.
Like, you should be buying. I mean,
wait, we have a trailer of the week, Matt, that people can't miss.
Is it God of War?
It's not.
Well, then what the hell?
It is time for our trailer of the week. It's also your opportunity to get some questions into the chat. If there's anybody left on this stream that hasn't run out to Walmart or Target to get this thing, our trailer of the week this week, there was actually a lot of good trailers. God of War's launch trailer was out there. The Shenmue trailer was out there, but obviously we had to show that for the segment. Here's a little under-the-radar game, franchise that I've always appreciated, probably more than I should, Serious Sam. Serious Sam, for the definition of the circle strafe shooter.
Also kind of like known as Duke Nukem, but not embarrassing.
Well, I don't know. Serious Sam could be a little embarrassing, too.
Serious Sam is silly, but it's not, like, gross.
No, that's a good way to put it, I guess. But I've always had a soft spot in my heart for this franchise, and they just finally showed the new trailer. for the 4th installment. I can't believe there's been 4 of these games. Or
It's been
there
a
will
long
be.
time.
Yeah, I guess so. But here it is, the debut trailer for Serious Sam 4. You like that cheap knockoff of Born to Be Wild?
Hey, it's a budget title.
You know you're working in a small studio when you can't get the rights for Born to Be Wild, so...
Man, that's like 30 grand right
So
there.
it's cheaper to just pay some garage band to make like a facsimile of it or whatever.
Probably like that band is probably made up of like team members.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it's probably like their band that they have on the weekends or whatever. Let's see. Let's get to some questions here. Wow, we're almost at 3 hours already, so I'm going to take a few. Here's one from W. Matthew. What do you think of the mess of a release that surrounded the PC version of Chrono Trigger? And more interestingly, under pressure, Square Enix is legitimately fixing it. What do you think of the whole situation? I think that's par for the course. Mm-hmm. A lot of Japanese publishers and developers, their games go on Steam or on PC, and they're either awful ports or it's a mobile version that they've ported over to the PC.
Square in particular is guilty of that.
You're right.
Above everyone. I mean, the Final Fantasy VI on PC is atrocious. Is not acceptable at all. I think they might. I don't remember if they fixed that or not. Chrono Trigger. I mean, I love Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is probably my favorite Super Nintendo game.
I think a lot of people would agree with that.
And it's certainly the best RPG Square's ever made. Except that was Enix.
I don't know about that.
I would put it above every Final Fantasy. And yeah, pretty much everything. Chrono Trigger is one of the best RPGs ever made.
No, I agree with that. But you start talking about some of Square Enix, well, just Square's SNES output, maybe splitting hairs, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing else that compares to it except maybe Final Fantasy VI. And I would probably give Chrono Trigger the nod because I like the music in Chrono Trigger better. But I'm a big Mitsuda fanboy.
Chrono Trigger also had subject matter that was outside the box a little bit.
Yeah,
pushed the envelope a little bit.
There was some daring things, and I mean, I hate Akira Toriyama's artwork, but I still love Chrono Trigger because it transcends all that.
Yeah.
So I was super excited to buy a nice PC version of it, and oops, it was garbage.
Yeah.
But when they fix it, I'll probably pick it up.
What are they fixing?
It was visual stuff, and I can't quite remember what the problem was. It was literally one of those things where like, I was like, oh, Chrono Trigger's out, and it was just like this tweet storm of like, do not buy Chrono Trigger, it's fucked up. Maybe the chat can remind us what it was, because all I remember was like, oh, they screwed it up again. I'll forget it. Like, I don't need it.
Let's see what else. The Legacy. Is God of War the game of the generation so far?
I don't know. I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, I haven't finished it yet. I can't say that. It's tracking that way.
I mean, it's in the conversation.
Yeah.
No
so
question.
far, unless it falls off a cliff at some point, I mean, it is walking that path right now, I guess is the best way to put it.
It is on the path to the top of the mountain.
It is. Yeah. When you play it, you'll know what that meant. J. Reed Vic 7 has the output across first and third party this generation been the lowest in the history of modern video games. Is there a particular reason we're nearly halfway through a cycle with very little from Bethesda, Gearbox, Rockstar, Capcom, etc.?
It doesn't feel like much less.
Well, there are less games. Absolutely, there are less games.
I agree that the output from those companies has been... Actually, not even, because Bethesda has put out a ton of stuff, just no one bought it.
Yeah.
If you mean like literally internally developed Bethesda productions, I mean, they put out Fallout 4.
Yeah, Bethesda's been fine. I think its output's been great.
The output has been steady. I don't know if I'd call it great. I didn't like
Depends on what kind of the
I didn't
games you
like
like.
Fallout 4. I
Yeah.
just thought Fallout 4 was a complete dud.
I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was amazeballs.
So I'm kind of waiting. I'm waiting for them to make something as good as Skyrim again, basically.
Yeah, which probably will happen with the next Elder Scrolls game.
Or whatever this Starfield thing is.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that game.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you don't talk about something for.
Well, I'm beginning to wonder if I should have put that on my draft list.
You think that'll come out this year?
I'm beginning to wonder if that has a better shot at being this year's game than Elder Scrolls 6.
Yeah, I don't know. But
we'll
Bethesda
see.
kind of rolls like that now. In general, and I think not just this generation, but maybe a little bit of last generation, there are just less games coming out, period. And, I mean, that void's being filled by tons of indies, which never existed before.
Right.
But if you look at, like, the total number of games released per year and compare, like, the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 4, not counting indie stuff, the PlayStation 2 destroys it.
Yeah, I don't know why I wouldn't count indie stuff, though.
Yeah, well, indies didn't really exist back then.
No,
and
but,
you can make
but
an
they
indie
do
game.
now, and they kind of have taken the place of that B and C list sort of slot that we used to get from Koei all the time.
Yeah, I don't know what's better, like a pretty good game that lasts 5 to 10 hours or a mediocre game that lasts 20 or 30.
I'd take the former.
Yeah.
Like, I'd rather play Night in the Woods and its ilk than, I don't know, Psyops or... I like Psyops.
But see, there's a lot of games like that back
Second
then, though.
Sight. The Second Sight. The other psychic
But there
game.
used to be lots of games like that, though, that were just like these kind of unique ideas, like, I don't know, Red Faction was kind of like that. Like these games that were just like the B level, weren't quite like big budget AAA, but had a unique concept or whatever.
I feel like the indie stuff has more or less filled that gap for me in ways that I don't miss that sort of, I don't miss the shovelware very much, really.
Capcom's output has been terrible, though.
Yeah.
Capcom, absolutely, you nailed it by calling them out. I mean, their output has been anemic. It's probably being generous.
I mean, the only thing I think they haven't completely screwed up is Monster Hunter World. I guess they've tried, more or less made good on Street Fighter V, but like that game is never going to come out from under the shadow of how it launched.
Yeah, I don't think we were even talking about quality, though. It's just quantity. Like, Capcom just has not released a ton of games this generation. It's just been very, very slow, especially if you compare it to last gen or even the generation before. It seems like it's slowed down a lot.
They got a few. I mean, they had Dead Rising 4 and...
Did Capcom publish that or Microsoft?
I thought Capcom published 4.
I don't know.
I thought Microsoft published 3. I can't remember now.
I don't either. But it tells you how unmemorable the games were. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the output's been lower. I think the indies have kind of filled in the holes a little bit in a lot of cases. Killzone 310, 420 stories. The 1G, I'm going to buy God of War 4 right now because of you guys. You will not regret it. I promise you. The Legacy, have you played Nintendo Labo? No. Have you played it?
Nope.
Just went out to the press this week. I did not get it.
Came out today. I don't intend to buy it, so...
Wait, did it release today?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in stores today?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it... Wow, that just went right over my head.
Unless
I don't know how I missed that.
I'm completely out in Crazy Town. I thought I've been under the impression that and God of War both came out today.
I had told you. You're right, though. It was 420. I just completely slipped my mind for some reason.
Smoke a blunt and make some cardboard.
Yeah, apparently. I think a lot of people are probably doing that right now. Smoking blunts and folding cardboard.
It's a good Friday night.
That is freaking funny. Let's see. If the Flyers somehow win games 6 and 7, I just saw that they lost. I checked the Penguins lost. I checked the score during the trailer of the week. I was disappointed to see that. But if somehow the Flyers win games 6 and 7, would you wear a Flyers jersey, shirt, or anything? Hell no. You would never catch me wearing a Flyers anything. Other teams maybe, but I hate the Flyers more than any, not even just hockey team, any athletic sport team anywhere. I cannot think of another team I detest more than the Philadelphia Flyers.
He won't even sign up for frequent Flyer programs.
Yeah. I hate the Flyers.
Do the Flyers have a single syllable nickname? Isn't it like a rule in hockey you have to have a
Well, there's like pens for the Penguins.
Pens and
the Flyers really don't, though.
They don't have? So they can't even do that right.
No.
Okay.
The Flyers used to be really freaking dirty. They've kind of changed the way they play now, but I can't forget. Let's answer one more. Well, maybe we don't have any more. Any game in particular you're looking forward to possibly playing at E3? That's from Vox91. That's the last one.
I'd like to. I don't know if they'll have it playable, but I would like to play Spider-Man.
Anthem for me. There's so many questions for me about Anthem. It's like
that's not going to be playable. I bet that's not going to be playable.
He just asked which one I want to play.
Yeah.
And that's what
Same,
I want.
I mean, maybe.
But no, EA said it is going to be playable.
Is it?
Already at their EA Play event. They already announced it, yeah.
Have fun in that line.
That's what I want to play, because after Andromeda, I want to know what's going on at BioWare. Can they recapture the magic? Is this game going to try to soak me for every microtransaction dollar that it can?
Well, yes, probably. But
it's
not the same people that made Andromeda.
No, I know. But still, it's the BioWare imprint. That means something. To me, anyway.
Used to.
Yeah. Well, I think it can again. That's why I want to check it out. So that's
certainly Anthem has a better chance of bringing that back than another Dragon Age.
Yeah. I mean, of everything that's announced right now, that's the one game for me.
I think Spider-Man is probably the thing I'm most curious about, just in terms of I want to feel how the web swinging works. Feel how it feels. I didn't word that right, but
feel how it feels.
But that's my big remaining question: is like, how does it feel to swing through the city like that? And hopefully they'll have some playables up for that, because like you never know with Sony. Sometimes they do that.
Sony is the king of no, that's not out on the floor. You have to go to some private room and like
chances
God
are,
of War wasn't on the floor at E3.
Horizon was never on the floor.
Yeah,
like it was just a giant billboard. They have those 3 theaters, right next to each other, and you just kind of go in and walk down the line. I think last year it was.
And then if you're an E3 judge, they'll put the controller in your hand for a minute to prove that the demo actually plays. Yeah. Yep, that's how it works.
Yeah, so it's usually like God of War and Days Gone, and there's a game that's speaking of gone.
Yeah, what the hell?
Do you think we'll see that at E3 in some form? Like even just
that's a good question.
Trailer or something?
I think so.
Or just
I mean, it's been around for so long, you can't just act like it doesn't exist because it was delayed.
Because we kind of still haven't seen just footage of it playing.
Yeah.
Like what are you doing in the game? Kind of like, what's the gameplay like?
Yeah, we've seen kind of like these little setups.
Little slices of it, but we still haven't seen sort of anything that gives you an idea of
what's the loop?
Here's what it feels like to just play the game for 10 minutes.
What's the gameplay loop? Yeah, that's the big X factor. So that's it for GameFace episode 125. We're both going to go home, and I'm going to put on my Kratos sweatshirt before I sit down and play some more God of War. You guys should all get off of this stream and go buy or play God of War. If you've bought it already, play it.
Or go join one of the 200,000 people watching it on Twitch.
Or you could do that. No, do not do that. Play it for yourself. Don't watch somebody else play.
We got some people in the chat that refuse to buy a console, so...
You're missing out. That's all I got to say.
But if you're not going to do that, you should experience it somehow.
Yeah, it's a really, really good game. So enjoy that this weekend. Before we go, Twitch Prime, it's the 20th. And we'll start promoting this on the site again as it gets near the end of the month. But for most of you guys, your subscription should have turned over. So we'd really appreciate it if you could, first of all, link your Twitch and your Amazon Prime accounts, and then subscribe to us through Twitch Prime. Folks on YouTube who are watching this for free, I think we've gotten pretty good about putting this up on YouTube within 5 days after it goes up for our patrons. If you guys cannot afford to support us in any way, and you watch GameFace and you watch Pactor Factor, man, you guys could make a world of difference for us if you subscribe to us through Twitch Prime. It's a free $2.50 a month just for having an Amazon Prime subscription. We would really, really appreciate it, and hopefully you guys feel like you're getting some value out of the content we're putting up on YouTube. And I think that's it. I think next week it might be our last episode in the studio.
It would have to be.
Yeah, because it'll be the 27th. Yeah, and then the 4th is the last day in the studio. So make sure you tune in last week as we bid Bon Voyage. I have some champagne.
Are you going to do some kind of like packing up live stream?
I am, absolutely. Yeah.
So it'll be the last GameFace, won't be the last time you see the studio.
Yeah. I'll be back in here when I'm like packing all this crap up, and I'll just do an IRL stream, and you guys can hang out with me and watch me like take this thing down and pack up all of our stuff.
Pack up all the grease paint and take down the big top and move on to the next town.
Yeah, apparently.
Don't worry, little buddy. There'll be other circuses.
Yeah. So thanks everybody on the stream. Thanks for watching us on Patreon, on Sifted, on YouTube. We love you guys very much. GameFace is up and out.